Morning, everybody. Welcome to Scrutiny Committee, Children's and Family Scrutiny. Date is Wednesday, the 10th of January, 2024. Happy New Year to everybody. Bad news is you've got me chairing today, but the good news is it's only going to get better when Lee comes back next time. We have got a few new members, so if you could just pop your hands up, the new members on this committee, please. Welcome. We've got a few that are subs. Yeah, brilliant. So I'm just going to remind people it's only committee members present in the room that can take any decisions at the meeting. Others in attendance are there to provide advice. I'd like to advise that there have been some recent membership changes. I'd like to welcome Councillor Pauline Ham, Councillor Marcus Kravis as members of the committee. These appointments replace Councillors Caroline Ellis and Jenny Kenton. It is with regret that I also advise you that Eileen Tipper, the long-standing co-opted member of the committee, has taken a difficult decision to stand down from the role. She was a remarkable lady and I'm extremely grateful for her time she's given to the committee and the Children's and Family Services over the years. I'm sure that you would all like to work with me to pass on our thanks and also send her best wishes for her future. I'd like to also read out a message from Councillor Redmond, who couldn't be here today. Eileen has been an amazing co-opted member of the committee. She has been there as long as I have, always ready to challenge or delve, and her knowledge, background and willingness to question or challenge has been so valuable to me in the committee over the years. I thank her for her service and her support to me. Her experience will be missed by the committee, and I really do thank her. Happy to note these. The agenda and papers have been published on the council's website in advance of the meeting. The council will be making an audio recording of the meeting as this will be published on the council's website in due course. Just going to highlight that today's meeting will run using a hybrid format with committee members and key officers physically present in Bridgewater. Other elected members and officers may physically or remotely join the meeting to speak on specific agenda items or observe. The council will make an audio recording of the meeting to assist with the recording of our discussions. This meeting is broadcast and therefore other members of the public and partners can observe the meeting remotely. To enable the meeting to run smoothly, sorry, this would have been better as an audio book, I think. Please use the meeting chat function only for purposes of the meeting, primarily to indicate that you wish to speak. Please only speak at the chair's invitation, and please say your name before speaking. The importance of turning off microphones and cameras when not speaking, so there isn't any interference. There is a facility under Teams with the ellipsis button called Turn On Live Captions, which I do believe is on the top right corner. Oh, got lots of voices. But straight onto the agenda. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Jamie, do I have any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee. We have received apologies from Councillor Redmond, for whom Councillor Smedley is substituting. Apologies from Councillor Hadley, for whom Councillor Slocum is substituting. Councillor Orlier, for whom Councillor Woods is substituting. We've also received apologies from one of our co-opted members, Ruth Hobbs, this morning, who's unable to attend.
Thank you. Do I have any other apologies from the floor, please? Thank you. Item number 2, declarations of interest.
Chair, if I may interrupt.
Certainly.
Councillor Hunt.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realise you had me there. Yeah, just to confirm, I'm unable to make it this morning due to a car issue, but I am joining you online.
Thank you.
Councillor Kendall, could I ask you to turn your camera off? Thank you.
Thank you. Item 2 on the agenda is any declarations of interest. Do I have any? Councillor Hand, please.
Just to declare a personal interest in that I have a family member who works for the Leaving Care team and a family member who works for these NDT.
Thank you. Just to remind people, I'm inviting members to declare any additional interests. There are published interest on the document City, Town, Parish, Twin Hatters and Somerset Councillors 2023 Modern Council. Hopefully it'll be 2024 soon. Any other declarations, please? Thank you. Item 3 on the agenda. It's the minutes of the last meeting held on the 12th of December. I'm just going to note that there was on the EHCP progress update on page 16, Councillor Francis Nicholson did send in a question and asked the committee to note that the responses are being collated. I'm asking the committee, to note that the responses are currently being collated and will be shared with the committee as soon as possible.
And will be published on the on our website.
Bear with us one moment while I check, please. Yes, they will be published on the website.
On the website where they should be, as though they were part of these minutes.
Yes. Thank you. Anybody wishing to raise anything else regarding the minutes? Are we happy to confirm that these minutes are accurate, please?
Thank you, Rose.
Thank you. Item 4 on the agenda, a public question time. I've not been indicated that any members of public wish to speak. Is there anybody online that wishes to say anything at this time, please? Oh, this is running smoothly. Okay, item 5 on the agenda for the Scrutiny Committee, the Children and Families Work Programme. This is on pages 21 to 34. The following documents are attached. The committee work programme is pages 21 to 28, and the committee's outcome tracker is page 29 to 34. The links to view the latest council forward plans and executive forward plan and plan key decisions that have been published are detailed on the agenda. The work plan is a blend of education, social care and commissioning, cross-cutting items and learning opportunities. Just going to invite Jamie to highlight, please.
Thank you, Chair. So a few points to highlight for the committee. The item on children's mental health and self-harm will now come to the March committee meeting. Asked that the committee please note that the annual report of the Director of Public Health will be considered by the Adults and Health Scrutiny Committee at their meeting on the 8th of February, although it is only an information item at that point. The medium-term financial plan will be on the agenda for the Corporate and Resources Scrutiny Committee meeting on the 1st of February, and all scrutiny members will be invited to attend that meeting. Implications and issues for this committee can be brought to the following meeting. However, the NTFP in itself will not be discussed at any other scrutiny committee meeting apart from that 1st of Feb Corporate and Resources meeting. And just to highlight that the next meeting of this committee is on the 13th of March and will be held in the John Meikle room at Dean House in Taunton. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll just give you a moment to make sure you've got these in your calendar. And I'm looking forward to the 13th of March. You'll all be there because it's my birthday.
Oh.
To open to committee if they've got any other agenda items suggestions.
Perfect. Yeah, please do let us know. So item number 6, sufficiency strategy for children looked after and care leavers 2023 to 2028. These are on pages 35 to 92 on your published agenda. The item will be led by Richard Selwyn, the Council Service Director of Children's Commissioning, and Julie Bree, Strategic Commissioner, Children and Care. Do we have Julie here today?
We've misplaced Julie, but she's coming very shortly.
Okay.
She's just done another football practice. So yeah, everyone. Today we're talking about the sufficiency strategy for children looked after. A sufficiency strategy is one of those foundations we use in commissioning. It sets the strategy for the next 5 years, and it's used for communicating with the workforce with a large range of providers that we have in this area, to the market and stakeholders as well. It's really important that in our sort of current financial context, that the strategy is there helping us to achieve more efficiency around children looked after. So you'll see that coming through in both the slides that we've got today and the sufficiency strategy that you've got a copy of, but also in the financial discussions we've got coming up throughout the MTFP as well. Very pleased to welcome Julie. Yeah, we've got some slides, which is it possible to share those?
It will be Fiona, are you able to share the slides from home? Just.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Need my-
Right, can everyone see the slides okay?
Not you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wait a second.
Is that all right?
So if you just say, Fiona's controlling them at home, so if you want to just say next slide when you're at that point, Julie, thank you.
Up my introduction. So good morning all. My name is Julie Briggs. I'm a strategic commissioner for children in care in Somerset. So next slide, please, Fiona. Thank you. So this slide just sets out how the sufficiency strategy fits in the overall children's services transformation priorities. So we're talking about that second box today on that slide, which we'll go on to a bit more detail. Next slide, please, Fiona, which just describes sufficiency in a bit more detail. So sufficiency is not our language, it's a sort of a legal language. Sufficiency means that we need to have enough high quality homes for all of our children in care and care leavers. That can be from 0 up to 25. It's more than just making sure we've got enough beds. Even though we do have quite enough beds in Somerset, we obviously have to make sure that we match those children. Some children can't live with other children. So it's a bit more complicated than just purely, do we have enough beds? We need to make sure that we've got a range of options for all of our children in care and care leavers. So that can be anything from a foster carer to a children's home to supported accommodation. So it's quite a wide range of accommodation. It's not just purely foster care, it's quite a range. We also have to make sure we have enough provision that meets a wide range of needs. So some of that could be a parent and child foster carer to quite a specialist children's home, and some of those can be secure children's home. So it's, I suppose what the message I'm trying to get across is it's quite a wide range of provision. We obviously don't run all of that provision in-house. We have to use quite a lot of different external providers to help us meet that provision. So a large part of my role is making sure we've got those relationships in place with all of our providers. We obviously try and find homes for all of our children in Somerset, but sadly sometimes we do have to find homes outside of Somerset. Another big role of sufficiency is, again, not just finding those pure beds, it's about finding different ways of commissioning. So a really good example of that is Homes and Horizons, which I'm sure you're hopefully all aware of. So that's where we have gone out to the market for a strategic partner, sort of share that risk with a provider. So it's trying to think of new ideas as well. It's quite a challenging market, and the children's social care placement market is quite frankly broken. Very difficult market to work in. So a lot of my role and talking with colleagues, Richard and Jane, is about how can we do things differently, which Homes and Horizons is a good example of that. The other thing we really strive to is provide that pathway for all of our children in care. So if they can't go home, then we need to make sure that we've got a good pathway ultimately for when that young person can live independently. And obviously a large part of the other bit is preventing children coming into care in the first place. So we try and control demand. So my colleague Louise Palmer, sort of that's her lead, to try and prevent children coming into care is quite crucial for us. So we've spent quite a lot of time producing a 5-year sufficiency strategy, and we're going to be publishing that on an annual basis. And the box on the right just describes the sort of the statutory duty, which is under Children's Act and section 22G. Next slide, please, Fiona. So the sufficiency strategy, which you should all have had sight of. This is our vision. So if we get all of our jobs right, we need to better support children at risk of coming into care before they come into care. We want to increase the number of foster carers. We have there's a national lack of foster carers across the whole country. We are doing a huge amount of work with our in-house foster service to try and create foster carers.
not an easy thing to do. We are doing really, really well, but we are always trying to increase the number of foster carers. Again, we've got our Homes and Horizons strategic partnership. We very, very recently recommissioned our supported accommodation service, but that's for our older young people, so our 16 to 25-year-olds. So some of those young people will be those that are leaving care, but we still have a duty to support them until they can live independently. And again, our vision is to improve choice and match homes to children so that we do get the right homes for our children. We are trying to bring more children back into Somerset. We do have a number of children currently living outside of Somerset. And a real pressure for us at the moment is obviously reduce some of our costs. So these weekly placements can be quite costly. So again, we are working really, really closely with all of our providers to try and get some of those costs down. Next slide, thank you. So there's quite a lot on this slide. I think the messages I would like Scrutiny to take away today is this is a national problem at the moment. This isn't just a Somerset issue. There is a national problem around a lot of local authorities really struggling to meet their sufficiency duty. We're seeing a number of children looked after have been rising steadily. So our numbers are going up across the whole country. The spend is also going up. There's some quite frightening figures there. Around local authorities spent 11.1 billion in children's social care in 21-22. And that's a huge 41% rise compared to 2009. So costs are going up and up and up. In 2021, government recognised that this was quite a tricky market. So they referred this to the Competition and Markets Authority, who, if anyone's interested, is quite a useful report to read. It really sets out the market very, very well and clearly. And those findings were no surprise to us, but what it did do is it confirmed that we do have a lack of placements of the right kind in the right place. We do have some large private providers that are making quite a lot of profit out of this, and that's a real challenge for us. Some of those big, large providers they have very high levels of debt, and they are quite high risk of falling over, basically. So if any of those collapse, that causes us a real problem as well. So we're doing a lot of work at the moment to understand which of those private providers we are using to try and reinvest in our Somerset providers to try and sort of disrupt that a little bit. We are also finding that some of our providers are struggling to care for our children that have higher complex needs. That's one of the main reasons why we've set Homes and Horizons up, which is taking some of our more complex children. That's really, really helping us at the moment, and that's proving really, really helpful. So a lot of my role is trying to work with providers to see, what would it take for them to take some of our more complex children. A lot of providers are very worried about Ofsted, so it's not just a council issue. This is an Ofsted regulation issue as well. We do have some new quality standards as well. So quite rightly, a lot of this is very tightly regulated. So Ofsted have recently introduced new quality standards for supported accommodation. So this is for our 16 and 17-year-olds. So providers are as well trying to grapple with some new legislation as well. I think I've touched on the recruitment of foster carers, but we also have quite a significant challenge for residential care workers in children's homes. Quite a tough job. It's not badly paid. You could probably earn just the same amount of money working in the supermarket. And as you can appreciate, it's quite a challenge working in a children's home. There's quite a big piece of work we're doing across the Southwest to try and raise the profile of working in children's homes. We've also got a challenge around, we have to participate in the National Transfer Scheme. So that means that we have to take our number of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children in Somerset. That number's increased over the past sort of 12 to 15 months. I think we're up to about 49 at the moment. So again, that is a real challenge for some of our providers, and sometimes we don't get a huge amount of notice for that as well. So although these are Somerset and national problems and challenges, really. Thanks, Richard. Next slide, please, Fiona. Thank you. I've touched on sort of the national context, but the Somerset context is quite you could probably copy that onto the previous slide. So we are seeing an increasing number of older children coming into the care system. So when I say older, I probably mean sort of our 15, 16, 17-year-olds. That's changed over the past 5 years. That's quite similar across other local authorities as well. Already touched on the lack of foster carers, but we are doing a huge amount of work to try and improve that. One of the problems with foster carers is we've got quite an ageing population of our foster carers. We've got some fabulous foster carers, but they're all getting older and we need to replace those, if you like. I've talked about also the recruitment and retention of carers and registered managers in our children's residential homes. That's a challenge for both Somerset Council and our private providers, but there is work underway to try and address that. And we are seeing an increase in children who require that specialist provision. So those children with some of our more complex needs. Some of those are in Homes and Horizons, but we still have more that we are struggling to find homes for. We're also seeing a lack of secure children's homes. So secure is quite a even more highly regulated, I would say, than a normal children's home. So what you're seeing is a lack of foster carers and a lack of secure beds means that there's this sort of big bubble in the middle. So we are really struggling across the whole country to find the right home for some of our children. What that results in is some of our private providers, they have a lot of choice. So they won't just be seeing referrals from Somerset, they'll be seeing referrals from lots of other councils as well. So they'll have a whole list of children and they can literally go down and cherry pick which children they would like to care for. That causes us a real problem. That means that some providers will tend to pick the easier children, for want of a better description. But we do have really good relationships with our Somerset providers. They will prioritise Somerset children first. And that's working really well for us in Somerset at the moment, but we can always improve. But it's from the provider side, it is quite there is a lot of children for them to choose from. Another issue which you may not be aware of, so although we've got 17 different providers operating in Somerset for residential homes, but that provision is open to all. So that's not just for Somerset children, like I tried to explain before. So what a large part of my role is, really working closely with those providers so they will prioritise Somerset children first. Not all providers do that, but the majority of them do. But it's just making that clear that, we don't have complete control over some of those homes in Somerset. What that can sometimes mean is if we cannot find a home for children, sometimes we have to sadly place in what we call unregistered. That means we will find accommodation and we will put additional staffing support in to support those children. Again, that's an issue for all local authorities. I'm pleased to say we've got very small numbers in Somerset. That's a good thing, and we've worked really hard on that, and Homes and Horizons is helping us with that. I've talked about the rising numbers of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. We are managing that well. Again, we've got a couple of providers that work really well with our US. They've got really good links to local mosques. They've got really good interpreters, etc., and they really understand the really different cultural needs of our US. So we've got some good providers working with us there. Another challenge for us is, I'm sure you'll all be aware, we have a bit of a housing crisis in Somerset. So once our older young people are in our sort of supported accommodation service, that service is becoming a little bit blocked because there isn't much move on accommodation for our young people to live independently. So we're doing a lot of work with our housing teams at the moment to see how we can identify some more move on accommodation for those young people. And lastly, the challenge is we have quite a number of children in care that are not in education. So there's a big piece of work going on at the moment, working with the education and the virtual school to try and really focus on getting more children in education. Next slide, thanks, Fiona. So this slide just basically tries to summarise all of that work that myself and my team are doing at the moment. We've chunked it up into 8 work streams, which I will just counter through. So the first one, the Homes and Horizons, that's a 10-year partnership. We're on just out of year 1. It's going really, really well, but we need to nurture and grow that partnership even more. We are still hoping to get our therapy to education open. hopefully this year, fingers crossed. And we are also trying to recruit more high needs foster carers as well, and we are opening more homes. The second chunk of work is our fostering improvement. A huge amount of work going on so that we can recruit and retain more foster carers. And how do we support our carers to take more complex children? Number 3 is the recommissioning of our 16+ service. We have awarded the first stage of that contract. So we've awarded 190 beds to YMCA Dolverton Group and YMCA Brunel Group. We're in the process of just putting an additional procurement mechanism in place so that if we need to, we've got some additional beds that we can draw on. That will be in place from April 24. The fourth box is our Edge of Care piece of work. So that's where we try and prevent children from coming into care in the first place. So that's got its own work stream in itself. Number 5 is all around intelligence and control. We've got a huge amount of data, but we need to make that data work for us. So what's that data telling us? Where is our next challenge coming over the hill? So we've got a huge amount of data, but we're just making that really, really smart so we can make that data work for us. And we can plan and react to that from a commissioning perspective a bit better. Number 6, the reason I was late, I was just on a quick call with some of our providers around inflation negotiations. So we work really closely with the market to try and agree how much inflation we need to give to our providers. Very challenging conversations around that because, as you can appreciate, national living wage has gone up, utilities, etc., etc. So that's quite a big piece of work to try and have that annual conversation with all of our providers. Number 7 is around how we manage that market. I think it is a very challenging market. Our vision and very much Richard's vision is to grow our Somerset providers. Let's focus on smaller providers and try and disrupt that larger private equity type market. There's a lot of work to do around that shaping and managing the market. And the last one, Somerset can't fix this on their own. So I'm part of a regional group. We've got 14 local authorities across the southwest, so there's a lot of work going on as a region to try and address this all together. I think the more local authorities that do this together, it's that sort of saying, we are stronger together. Next slide, please. So this just gives you a quick flavour about what sufficiency looks like in Somerset, in case you had any questions. So we've got about 17 residential different providers operating in Somerset. That gives us about 120 beds. That's enough beds for children in Somerset. But you have to appreciate that we can't just place 3 children in a home. They have to be able to live with one another. So we do lose some beds because of that. We also lose beds because other local authorities are using them. And we can also lose beds because of the recruitment challenges. So we may have a 3-bedded children's home, but only 2 beds can be available because they can't recruit additional staff. So it's not as simple as there being enough beds. We've got 2 independent fostering agencies that operate in Somerset. So although we have an in-house foster care service, there are independent fostering agencies that operate as well. So we work really closely with those 2 fighters, as we call them. The supported accommodation market is a little more buoyant, I would say. We have around 15 supported accommodation providers, including those 2 YMCAs that we work with quite closely. There's a bit more competition in that market, so I would say that of the 3 markets, that's probably the easier one, whereas fostering and residential is a bit more challenging. And the table at the bottom just describes some of the commissioning arrangements that we've already got in place, just to provide some assurance of scrutiny. So we've got our Homes and Horizons strategic partnership. That's in a 10-year partnership with Homes to Inspire, who are part of the Shore Trust. That provides us with about 14 beds, and obviously that number will increase as we bring more homes and foster carers online. Somerset are part of a fostering framework, so that's where we jointly commission fostering agencies alongside Devon, Plymouth and Torbay councils. We've got 11 independent fostering agencies on that framework, and that it's very hard to know what foster carers that gives us. There's not quite so much information around how many foster carers are part of each of those agencies. It's a bit of a finger in the air. That's always quite hard to know the numbers. Somerset are also part of a Peninsula residential framework. Again, we've got about 14 providers on that framework. That gives us about 75 beds within Somerset, Plymouth, Devon, Torbay footprint, and it gives us just over 80 beds outside of that footprint. And then we've just recently commissioned our housing related support and accommodation contract. So that's with the 2 YMCAs, and that gives children's social care 100 beds, and that also provides 90 beds for 18 to 25-year-olds that are not in care. I'll explain that as clearly as I could. And then we've also got the 16 plus dynamic purchasing system, which will give us even more beds from April. Not sure how many beds that's going to be yet, depends how many providers join us. That just gives you a bit of a flavour as to what arrangements we've got in Somerset. I think that was the final slide. Pause for breath, take any questions.
Well done. Members, do I have any questions, please? Councillor Level, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Julie. Fostering clearly has, it sounds like one of those generation handover issues. If you're talking about an aging population, what is the process for recruiting? Well, 3 things: getting a new generation involved. Secondly, recruiting, and what is the process of incentives encouraging people to become foster carers? Thank you.
Can you take that one? You probably know more than me on that.
Yes, thank you for the questions. Jane Shelburne, Service Director for Children and Families. So we've been doing a lot of work for many years around fostering, but have really been thinking much more creatively and thinking about how do we make fostering something that people feel they can do on a daily basis, rather than being something people consider when they're considering maybe semi-retirement or retirement. So there are a number of kind of incentives. One, we need to be very clear about what the offer is around finance, because clearly, whilst that's not the key driver for people to become foster carers, there is a reality that people need to live, be able to maintain their homes and care for children to a standard that we want them to support them to do. So being really clear around what the offer is around both that fee element, which is much more around what they get for doing the care, but also that allowance, is that what are we providing to assist you to clothe and feed our children. So that's the first bit around that incentive. What we know though from feedback with carers that what's really important to them is the level of support that they get, both in terms of them as carers from their supervising social worker, but also the response they will get from Somerset, from that child social worker. So what we've been really focused on is saying to that foster carer, there are a team of people around you and around that child that are able to respond to you, provide you with training, a line that you can ring if you want advice or support. What is it that you need, and a quick response, because if you've got a child that's distressed in your care or you need something, what you want to know is someone is going to come out and see you, be with you, sit with you during that difficult time. So yes, there's a financial element, but much more around that training, that support, how we can use other carers to be like buddies, which is a model that's done nationally around hubs of carers. We have really good examples where we have carers who support each other in small communities. So they'll arrange, one's going on holiday, a carer they know will look after their children. So it's about trying to establish that community of carers as well. So there's no really quick win. It's looking at all the mix of things, but certainly, yes, money's important, but that support and training, everything is key to that retention of carers and them feeling valued and that we see what they're doing. Does that answer the question?
That's perfect.
Do you want to just focus slightly on this thing about a new generation of carers? Because you flagged up that it's an aging population. Something's got to be done about that. What sort of issues are you encountering in that handover issue?
So what we saw during the pandemic was we did have a number of younger carers come forward during the pandemic because they weren't working. So they saw that as something they could do. I think we had about 7, I might be slightly wrong, but around that number that came forward. Unfortunately, when then the pandemic ended, most of them did then return to work and stop caring. So I think the trying to understand the the finance side of it, as in what's why we've reviewed our fees and allowance, what would be enough to mean that it could be a choice, a career choice for the younger generation is key. So we're in discussions, we're talking to people, we tried to go to all those carers to understand whether it was an option for them to stay on as carers, what would have made the difference. But what we've seen through our recruitment is we have got some younger people coming forward, showing an interest, and it is about trying to get to the right places. We've been out to the staff of Somerset Council as well to talk about different types of caring, and are there any staff that would like to do a weekend a month to offer that regular break for a child, so they become an aunt, an uncle, because that's really important that they still have that network. So I'm not sure I fully answered your question. It's about trying to look at all the different ways of how we can make it a real choice for people to become a carer, make it viable for them.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you. I would encourage anyone to look into fostering. Myself, who is going through again, preference as teenagers. I think that fits in well with my own children, and I've absolutely loved it. It's lovely being part of a big family. So age isn't a barrier, whether you're young, older, mid-range, but having those connections. And why I've stepped back in again is to be part of that quality team. For an example, I'm going to give this week, I've expressed an interest in unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. As soon as I mentioned it to my supervisor and social worker, I had that phone number and that connection ready available. So you know, you are part of a team and you really are supported. So if you can't offer that yourself, please do talk to any of us to try and help us promote out, because it is so rewarding. I have Councillor Slocum next, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your report. There are a couple of things I wanted to ask. One of them is, I'm very concerned about the supported housing for the rising 16 to 24-year-olds, because we seem to have, especially in this locality, a definite need for young people who are not under that system, who need to be supported, get supported housing, but don't fit in and they fall through the net. And the other thing I'd like to ask is, what are your figures for the specialism of foster carers who are emergency foster carers who are taking children in with a specific need? When I'm saying those that have been removed from their families for their own safety, there are some tragic stories we hear now. Are your figures, are they leveled? Are they okay? Or do you needing more? What is the situation? Because that must be a really, very difficult situation when you have to remove a child immediately, but you need to know they need to go into a home or a care. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Slocum. I'll take the first question and I'll probably hand over to Jane, the emergency foster carer. So supported housing is a huge issue for us. So I think one of the benefits of Unitary is we are now working really closely with our housing teams. So we're having regular calls with the service director in housing. And I think that is going to bear some additional accommodation. It's not going to be a huge amount, but we are working more closely with our housing teams now so that we can join children and adult requirements into that housing strategy. But it's not going to be a quick thing, because there's lots of other families that need housing as well, isn't there? So it's a long-term strategy, I would say, in Somerset.
If I may, Madam Chairman, then just what I wanted to say was there are many young people who have come off the 25s and they're literally left. Some of them are just slipped through the net, and some of them, with the greatest respect, are younger than that in their ability. And what's happening is that I'm hearing more and more of those young people that don't fit the criteria here, don't fit the criteria there, and they're slipping through the net. And I think we just need to be mindful of this,
Yeah, absolutely. And we are we're doing a lot of learning from other local authorities at the moment. So we are exploring what we're calling a rent guarantor scheme for our children in care and care leavers. So for those young people that want to move on from our supported accommodation service and they can't afford the rent, we're just looking at the council becoming their rent guarantor just to give them that bit of security. So we are looking at different schemes like that.
That's very good.
Yeah, so we are looking at different ways to try and support some of our younger people. I'll hand over to Jane for the emergency foster care.
Thank you. And just to add to that, I think now being one council, we have an opportunity to actually look at those move on plans for our young people, whether they're over 25 or under. And it should be an easier. So with regards to the foster carers, when you go through the process as a foster carer and go to the panel, you're able to say whether you want to be either that emergency, short-term or a long-term carer or a mix of all of those. So some carers prefer to have children that go to them in a very planned way that they propose to keep for a longer period of time. We do have a number of other carers on the books who only do emergency. So they're the people that you can ring up on a Friday at 4 o'clock, say, can you offer this weekend or a week? So we do have some. As with all foster carers, we need more. We are much more successful at being able to place younger children in emergencies. People are much more open to taking babies or very young children. Where we struggle the most is with teenagers. Thank you, Councillor Potts, for singing how great it is being a carer for teenagers. So, and they're often the ones where we really do struggle about what can we do for the weekend? Are there any other family members? And sometimes there really aren't, and that leaves us in a really difficult situation because they deserve, like everyone else, to be in that family environment and to have that same level of support. So we do have some, and most of the time we are able to find a foster home for children in an emergency, but as part of our recruitment, we're really keen to recruit more.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Yeah. The struggle nationally for foster carers is huge. We do know that, and we here in Somerset have made efforts over the years to change the way we recruit, always to improve, always to move at the time. But what would be, I think, would be really helpful to the committee is to have a bit more idea of how things have moved. In other words, what's been over the last few years. What was the initial number of foster carers we had? How many left? How many came? And what did we end with at the end of the year? And perhaps what did that mean in terms of children? Because some of them will be able to take one, some will be able to take more. So that's perhaps a bit of information that might be helpful. And the other thing I would like to hear perhaps a little bit about is the Homes and Horizons absolutely is admirable and exemplar. The education bit I would like to hear more about, please. And the other thing is, do we envisage other children's homes that we might set up outside the Homes and Horizons project, or is that where we're concentrating? So there are three questions there.
I'm going to look at Richard's notes to remind me. So I think for the fostering data, absolutely, we can bring that to future scrutiny. We've got all of that data. Jane is scrutinising that on a weekly basis, so we can certainly bring.
Perhaps it could be attached to the minute.
Or just attach it to the minutes if we've got something.
Yeah.
Okay, the second part was therapeutic education. I'm going to hand over to Claire because Claire has got more up-to-date information than myself, and then I'll come back and answer the next bit.
Okay, so the therapeutic education, just to give some context, is part of the Homes and Horizons project. The Homes and Horizons project is providing homes for the most complex children in care. So the homes for children, in terms of the children's homes, obviously where they are starting off. And we know that for the most complex children, they don't very often have access to education. Some of them are on part-time timetables, and some of them haven't had an education focus for some time, some years, because they're too complex for people to educate. So we know that education is the passport to a better future. So we need to provide them with some form of education that will meet their education and their therapeutic needs. So the therapeutic education element is jointly funded with the NHS, the CAMS, to the tune of 16 million to provide an education environment for up to 15 children. We'll have 2 sites, up to 30 children overall, with CAMS on site, to provide the therapeutic element and teaching staff there to provide the education element on an escalating model of being able to engage in education to get to the point of being able to have qualification. So we have been talking to the Department of Education about this for over a year now to try and get this into place. The difficulty is that the funding model the Department of Education looks at through the DSG does not include an element of funding for health, and they are really struggling with the idea of health providing funding and what will happen in health withdrew that funding. Health are not going to withdraw that funding, they're very committed, but every child who has a school place is funded through the DSG. So we're actually health is to some degree subsidising what would automatically be there, and it would just come straight back into the DSG if the health did withdraw. They're also struggling with the model on the basis that this is a model of education which is very unusual. There's another one in Surrey called Hope House, which has been incredibly successful, but it is not a standardised model, and they are, the Department of Education are struggling with the whole concept of the tripartite homes, foster care and school, and the staffing thing staying around all of them. So we did at the just before Christmas, we had a conversation with the Department of Education to tie up some loose ends. They are satisfied now with the model and the funding model, but it had to be signed off by a minister, and Parliament had by the time
Gone away from the whole holiday.
yeah, gone on
Yes,
holiday, yeah. By the time we got to the point of that, so we are expecting this week or possibly early next week for the minister to sign that off. We have assurance from the involved in the Department of Education that that will be the case. The building, the first Therapeutic Education in Listerton, is being refurbed as we speak, with a likely date of that being completed by the end of March. What we hope is to be able to open that first therapeutic provision by the summer of April. We have already employed the head teacher and the teaching staff, and they have been working with the children who need that therapeutic education outside an education environment, effectively in the homes, to help those children develop their education potential and to start learning in a way that they haven't been able to do for some time. I'm sure, says very confidently, by the next Scrutiny committee, I'll be able to come back and say that has been agreed, and we're well on track to that in therapeutic education first provision openly.
Can I come back? Can I come back?
Yes.
Two questions. The first one is, as originally envisaged, it was felt that I understand that 10 children were quite enough to be at Misterton. And I don't know about the Wellington side, but that in general, the needs of these children were so complex that 10 was about as many as you would ever want to have, even if they're not there all the time. Are we now going up to 15, and are we confident that that will work just as well? That's one comeback. The second one is, perhaps you could tell us a bit more about that. We have had children in these homes now for 4 months, a bit more about their education, if we've only just now appointed a head teacher. Because these children can't do without being brought back to education while the Department for Education is getting its knickers in a twist.
So in relation to the 10, I don't recognise that number at all. I think in the business case, always is the same. And we are confident that with the Shore Trust, who will be the provider, that will be an academy school, that we have the right facilities and size of premises to manage up to 15 children. The plan is that that education provision will be open 50 weeks per year, so it won't operate just in school term time, because we recognise that these children have a lot to catch up on, and doing activities on the school site during school holidays that have an education component will be important to help them catch up and develop the education potential they have. In terms of the head teacher has been in place since, I want to say, September, is that right? Yeah, so they have been enrolled for the last 3 months, 4 months, and they have been working with staff that was also appointed to work with those young people since then. We have been very clear that the first child moved into the home in January last year, so just over a year, and we have put a huge amount of effort in with the virtual school to make sure those children have an education programme. So some of them are accessing mainstream education now, which is amazing, very small number. and the others have a very as nearly full-time programme as we can make it in terms of alternative provision and tutoring and other education provision. There's a head teacher coming in September with the other staff. They've been able to take over the tutoring type element of that to build the relationship with those children so that when we actually can open the school, they actually know the staff and will be more comfortable going into that environment. People that already know.
Thank you. So all of your questions answered? Lovely, thank you. Councillor Kravitz, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Julie. Yeah, I've actually got loads of questions, some being picked up. As a newbie to the committee, apologies if yeah, apologies if I should know, but I suppose, first of all, and apologies if it's the figures are later on in the report that I've just missed because I've looked for them and haven't necessarily found them, and I might have just been me. But I think firstly, you said about homes outside Somerset, and I wondered, okay, definition of how many are placed outside of Somerset. Then what's the definition of outside Somerset? You know, is it Bristol? Is it, I don't know, Redcar? Sorry for making on Redcar. And I think it was interesting what you said about children's placement market being broken. But I also wondered, I saw the word illegal placement, and I wondered what an illegal placement was and how it worked. Getting on to, I suppose, the more interesting ones, I suppose, is you talked about unaccompanied asylum seekers. We've obviously got a growing problem, well, the whole country's got a growing problem of refugees or asylum seekers being granted, or refugees being granted asylum seeker status, and then being told, by the way, you can't stay in this hotel anymore. And that could be people with families and children as well. And obviously, we've talked about the housing crisis. How do we then talk about that added pressure? So not necessarily straight away, but maybe in a year's time, suddenly we're having more children coming to us because of their families being put in that situation. How do we deal with that? Foster care is being talked about. And I think you mentioned excessive profits. And of course, we all know that, you know, if there's excessive profits in any industry, you don't necessarily get the right people attracted to that market. I'm sure those larger providers will all say they're whiter than white and etc. But then so did the post office, and so did the banks. But how do we stop? And what control do we have? Because we don't want this sort of care being run by KPIs on a big service provider. How do we stop that? And how do we prevent it running away with itself? And I suppose my final question was, we talked about the 16 to 17 supported accommodation providers, and obviously you've heard of the YMCA and Dulverton Group, etc. And you talked about more competition in that market, which is maybe a good thing because they are the only ones that I've ever heard of. But then how do we again stop that competition from watering down the quality that's provided by those groups? I'll leave it at that. I think I'll leave it at that for the time being. And yeah, anything else I'll pick up later. Thank you.
Right, let's try and take your questions. Thank you, Martha. So, with the sufficiency strategy that was circulated, we as of September, this figure, we had 38% of our children in care living outside of Somerset. I can't do the math quickly enough. 38% in terms of numbers. Yeah. And in terms of, that's literally outside of Somerset, so that could be just over the border in Wiltshire, Dorset, Bristol. So yeah, that's how we define out of Somerset.
Or Inverness.
Or Inverness, absolutely. We do have children over the country. The next question. Oh, and there was a definition, wasn't there, of unregistered?
There was illegal.
Illegal, sorry, yeah. So children's homes and fostering is highly regulated. So if we can't find a regulated provision for a child in care, that becomes unregulated. Unregulated before the new regs came in was okay for 16 and 17-year-olds, but now there's new regulations that have come in. If we can't find that regulated provision, that then becomes an illegal placement because it's unregistered. Does that explain it?
Yes, I just thought that I was saying, I was worried, sorry if I can't convince you, I was worried there was like a black market in placements going on. That's those wordings, unfortunately, I can understand where it's come from.
It's not a place that we want to be, but we've worked really hard in getting our numbers down. So the next question was around asylum seeker status. Jane, you may be better placed to help me with that one.
Yes, I think what you were referring to was the children that come in with their parents as opposed to the children that arrive unaccompanied, which is what a lot of this data refers to and what our offer is under the National Transfer Scheme and those young people turning up unaccompanied spontaneously. So we obviously have had hotels in Somerset that we are, you know, working very closely with our colleagues around what children do arrive with them and what don't. And, you know, yes, that family need to be housed, and some of the pressures for us are around education, particularly because they are arriving with their families. We're not being asked to provide care and homes for those children, but clearly those children need to access services alongside other children, which will put pressure on education and other services. As far as the care element of that goes, the majority are coming with parents, so they're not coming into our care, but may well be supported by our other services as well. So yes, there is a pressure, it's an unknown pressure around that, as it is nationally, but that isn't having an impact on our need for more foster carers at this current time.
So in terms of the last question, Councillor Kravis, around those larger profiteering providers, we know who they are. What is quite tricky is some of the larger providers keep following up the smaller providers, so you have to keep a real close eye on sort of Companies House and credit safe reports, because it's quite an industry that you need to keep on top of. So we've got a pretty good handle on how much we're spending with them and who they are. We've got quite an ambitious sort of market disruption strategy in our minds around how we can invest more in our local providers so that we can disrupt those larger providers. Again, it's not going to be an easy task, and it's going to take quite some time. Richard, did you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, I'll just say it's a big national problem, a huge national challenge. You know, we are quite big and largish county. You know, we're still quite small in comparison to the national market, so there's limited amount we can do to kind of change how that works at the moment. So every time we're engaging with the market, there's national pressure. You know, there's lots of other local authorities looking for that particular placement, and that creates particular behaviours in the system. What we can do is build relationships. That's a big part of it. And we've got different procurement mechanisms that we can use as well. What's tricky at the moment is no one really knows the right procurement mechanisms to use because the market is so it's run away with itself a bit too much. There was one county recently that put out for I think an IFA a soft block contract, and they got no one responding despite having hundreds of providers, hundreds of beds locally. So it's in the interest of the market not to be part of those arrangements, they'd rather be support purchasing where they can get higher profit margins. So it's really difficult to find the right construction to make that work. That's why Homes and Horizons have been really successful, because it is a genuine partnership that helps us to then secure the quality that we want, the level of complexity that we need to be supporting, and put that in place. So we've got obviously plans to Homes 7 and 8 and additional annexes as well that will make a big difference. Beyond that, we may end up with Homes 9 and 10, although we need to look at financing for that. And then we're looking at how can we engage the market and find those partnership arrangements that might support us both around IFAs, so internal external fostering, but also around residential homes as well.
I think the final question was around the supported accommodation. Yeah, so it is a bit, like I said, it's a bit more of a buoyant market. With the dynamic purchasing system that we're putting in place, providers will have to complete what we call a selection questionnaire. Within that questionnaire, there will be quality questions. So we'll make sure that they're registered with Ofsted if they want to look after our 16, 17-year-olds. If there's a provider on there that we've never used, we've got a very small quality assurance team that go out and do sort of quality assurance checks to make sure they're doing everything safely. So we've got quite a lot of things in place to try and make sure that that's all safe. I think that was all your questions.
Yeah, thank you, and apologies for the long list.
No, it's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to Councillor Slocum and then on to Councillor Hunt, and then I'm going to round this one up. Thanks.
Yeah, it's just a quick clarification, really. When you say the illegal, which I picked up earlier, so the illegal placements, that is not approved placements on your standard from your criteria, not illegal, as opposed to that's where you know, It's just a bit worrying, that name illegal, and I would like to see some figures really. How many do we think are illegally placed? I think that would be worth knowing, but I just needed to know that clarification, please.
I'll hand over to Claire to explain, probably better than I can.
So those placements are illegal. We have to acknowledge that they are not within the law. So we currently have 2 young people who are in those placements, and they are placed in those placements because there is no registered provider in the country that will take those children or look after them because of the level of complexity of their needs. What we do in order, so that is registered, then those placements are therefore not registered with Ofsted, and that makes them unregistered and therefore illegal. There's been some case law around that because obviously the courts are not happy with children being placed illegally in people that are not registered with Ofsted and therefore not quality assured. And the procedure is that if you have a child who has to be placed in an unregistered placement, normally we would go to court and explain to the court why we've had to do that. Court does not have the authority to mandate the placement, to verify that that placement is suitable, but it does have the authority to say that they will oversee the way the local authority works for that placement and to make sure that the local authority is doing the very best they can for that child while we're looking for a registered placement. So we do go to court when we have those issues in order to make the court aware that we are working unlawfully, and to give the court the reassurance or assurance as much as we can that we are doing the very best we can with that child. The court can be quite stern, I suppose, about that and be very unhappy about what's happening with that child. And they can sometimes order that we change the unregistered provider because they're not happy with the quality, or request further assessments, etc., to try and identify what it is that needs to be done to keep that child safe and to move that child into a registered provision. So it's a very uncomfortable place to be. We don't like having children in those places because we know they are not the best quality, because there are not that many providers in that market of good quality. But we do use the mechanisms we've got and the frameworks we've got within the legal system to try and keep that child as safe as possible and to give us the challenge that we need to try and make sure that we've got the best possible care and assessments in place to be able to move that child to registered provision.
Thank you very much. That's very well explained. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Hunt, thank you for being patient.
No problem, Chair, and good morning, everybody. Page 41, there's the Children's Looked After Outcomes Transformation. And the part of that I was a little bit concerned by is the inflation negotiations with providers. It was well explained during the presentation. I think Julie gave it. Thank you for that. It was very good. But on these inflation negotiations, obviously, the discussion was them going up and how much more we should pay and how difficult those negotiations are. And I can only imagine that is the case. My question is there something built into these negotiations, or can this be changed at a later date when inflation as it is now comes down? And actually, at the moment, the council taxpayers of Somerset are continually paying more to these providers. I appreciate their costs have gone up, but one assumes when inflation comes down, interest rates come down as they are now, these costs go down, and do then the benefits come back to the taxpayers, the ratepayers of Somerset? And that is a concern. Or are we in a situation because we have no choice about who we use, or very little choice, because there are so few providers now, that actually we're rather over a barrel? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll answer as best I can. So where we've got providers that are on contractual framework, so you'll recall I mentioned the Peninsula Fostering and Residential Framework. That's a bit easier. We have an annual fee protocol which we can refer to. We did really well last year. We held at 3% last year. That was quite a difficult message for those framework providers to accept. What we do with those providers that are not on any contractual framework, it's quite a laborious, quite a detailed conversation we have with them. We have a look at their Ofsted judgment. We have a look at where they are. Are they prioritising Somerset children? We have a look at companies' house data to try and understand some of their profit levels. So we've got quite a detailed process that goes through one by one. It takes quite a lot of time. So we have, it's easier for the framework providers, but it's a bit more time consuming for the off-framework providers. Richard, anything else to add?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, the inflation happens at two different points, really. One is the annual process where we do negotiate the uplifts or keeping things the same if we can. But the other one is that every time we have a new placement, there is inflation built into the pricing. So where we're under competition with other local authorities to secure a place for a young person or child, we are pushed to inflate the price effectively. We know that inflation is well above the CPI rate, and we know that profiteering is fairly widespread in the market at the moment nowadays, unfortunately. So really the negotiations are about how can we hold providers as much as possible to keep the costs in line, but that's done on an annual basis as well as every time that we have that individual negotiation. But as I said, the market is very difficult at the moment. It's a national market that we are playing in, but one where we have limited effect on how that operates here.
May I come back on that, Chair, just slightly, just shortly?
Yes, please, Dean.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. It's a good answer. And the 3%, yes, you're right, was a very good deal at the time. Just on what I was saying about that, so when you actually have these negotiations, you agree a small increase or whatever it may be. Is there any way in those negotiations to have a clause that states when inflation comes back down and their costs change, that we can actually have not that money back, but actually reduce the amount we pay them in future?
I think we could. I think the trouble is that we've got to also make sure we can secure the placements as well. And so that may put off some providers from working with Somerset. And also bear in mind, this is not about inflation. This is about much higher levels of profiteering inflation that we've got going on, not just the CPI levels of inflation. So the inflation levels are sort of double digits for quite a lot of our services every year. That's quite significant, it's well above the CPI rate of inflation. So it's about how do we negotiate with the market, how do we set up different procurement mechanisms which enable us to manage the risk of increases of spend across the whole cohort of placements we have.
Thank you very much.
Please, Dean.
Thank you. So I suppose, Councillor Hunt, it's also not about what necessarily is fair, it's about what the market demands. So when you've got a market, which is what's happening nationally at the moment, where there are more children in the market than can be accommodated effectively, which is why we have some of these illegal placements for those who want to accommodate some of these children, that providers can, as Julie said earlier, pick and choose. So if they can pick and choose, they can choose between an authority that says, we'll pay you this much, and actually we're going to review inflation every year and go with CPI or whatever each year, depending on what that looks like. And another authority that says, actually, we'll pay you this much and we're not going to worry about the future at the moment. They will go with the second one because it's easier in terms of managing their profit levels and planning their profit margins, etc., than it is to have to go into negotiation on an annual basis with another authority. And that is uncomfortable because this is basically, these are businesses. You have to remember that these are not altruistic people who are looking after children for the love of it. Some people do love their jobs. I'm not saying they don't love their jobs, and some people do an amazing job, but they are businesses, and particularly the ones that are private equity backed are looking for profit, and they're looking for profit for shareholders in the region of 25 to 30% on an annual basis. So the motivators, if you like, in that market are very different, and working with those motivators and enabling us to find the best quality provision with children is a very difficult task.
I appreciate that. I'm assuming, sorry, Chair, just to come back briefly, I assume from that we are over a barrel, and yes, I accept entirely what you say, and the market is a very difficult place indeed, and the profiteering is absolutely incredible. It just seems such a shame we can't, I suppose if we can increase the Horizon scheme even faster, then perhaps we can overcome some of this. Thank you very much for your explanation.
Thank you. Claire, did you want to come back at all? Thank you.
Can I just, Richard, just to say, so yes, lots of things we can do locally, and we are doing, and there's a huge amount of work as you can see from the efficiency and transformation plan. But we are also trying to engage on a national level to solve these problems, because we aren't going to be able to solve everything from a local level. So we're working with ADCS We're also starting to work with the Department for Education as well, and we'll see how that goes. It's early days, but we've got some ideas about how we might be able to get more of a grip nationally on where we are as well.
Thank you. So my little schedule tells me I need to sum up at this point. So thank you, Richard and Julie. I'm sorry if I end up reading half of the schedule out. I don't want to go over and over what we've done, but we recognise the need to find the right quality home for the children. The key area, one of the key areas is prevention for the children coming into care. Foster caring recruitment is a national problem as well as local. We're looking at lowering our costs at the same time as providing the consistent quality care. We spoke of Somerset's challenges, and we highlighted the increase in the children with complex needs and the housing issues, and working with the providers to overcome these issues. Questions raised, lovely quality questions, thank you. Can we try and be a little bit more concise, because I struggled a little bit to work out what was being asked. So if I'm struggling, I'm sure there are other people. For the next steps, we've asked for fostering data to be attached in the future. So many thanks. Item 7, I'm really sorry, we're behind a little bit. The 2023-24 children's budget, children's service budget monitoring, item 7. So on pages 93 to 102. The item will be led by Christine Evans, Head of Finance and Business Partnering. I'm just going to invite the exec member Heather Shearer to see if she would like to say anything beforehand.
Sorry, first of all, just to say thank you, Chair, and thank you to everybody. It's my first meeting in a very big shoes of Tessa Munt as lead member for Children and Family Education. Obviously, I've been tracking as we all have been tracking the budget monitoring situation for all of the months since this new year began. I don't think I need to say any more. I'm going to hand over to Christian and the team just to take us through it. But of course, if there's anything I can answer questions on, I'd be happy to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Actually, I think the conversations we've just had, or we've just been talking about, a very good context around the difficulties in children's budgeting and budget monitoring. Actually, some of those you touched on as well relate to adults as well. So you'll see in the second where we are budget-wise, but I think just useful context around where we are. Anyway, okay, so this is the month 7 budget monitoring report. There are some slides, hopefully. Few slides. Yeah, are you okay to share again?
Yep.
Thank you. So yeah, there are some slides there. It is quite difficult to see the first slide. It's quite a big table. So from an overall corporate perspective, the overspend is predicted to be £18.3 million. This is about 3.8% overspend on the £492 million budget that Somerset Council has. However, that is an improvement of 400,000 actually from the previous month. The largest overspends, as we've just kind of talked about, are as expected in adults and children's. The overspend in adults is predicted to be 14.9 million. Children's is predicted to be 13.9 million. Next slide. Hopefully the children's one. The overspend of 13.9 million. So that's about 11.3% of the 122 million pound net budget. So this is an increase of 1.5 million from the previous month. External placements, as we've just been talking about, are the biggest proportion of the overspend at 10.9 million pounds. And generally the main increases in predictions are for external placements, field work, which is family support packages, children's social care management, and EPS management. So what I'll do now, we'll go into a bit more detail to external placements monitoring. I'll hand over to my colleague Stuart, who is online, to take us through some of the detail.
Yeah, morning everyone. If we could just quickly flick back to the previous slide, is that possible? Yeah, okay. So what we're focusing on here is the external placements element of the overall children's social care budget. And as you can see from the figure right in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, the £10.9 million forecast overspend represents the lion's share of the £13.9 million overspend for children's social care overall. So it's a really significant element of where we're spending our money on these external placements. And within external placements, there's two areas that in particular are overspending. The first one is the external residential placements, and the second one is the unregistered placements, which were mentioned in the earlier sufficiency strategy item. Could we move on to the next slide? Yeah, so those two key areas of the external residential placements and the unregistered placements. The first graph in the top right-hand corner of the screen, the blue line is showing us the actual number of placements at the end of each month. So this is going back roughly 18 months to the beginning of the 22-23 financial year. So you can see we've got an upward trajectory on the number of placements with external residential providers. This year, we are forecasting to have an average number of placements for the year of 90, which compares against a budget figure of 77. The budget figure for last year was 78. So the budget figure of this year is on par with last year. The unregistered placements, the graph in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. These are the unregistered placements, and we've got those numbers right down. I think the numbers now are maybe one or two. Colleagues in the service might be able to provide input there as to exactly where we are currently. But those numbers have been coming down significantly recently. And we budgeted for 3 placements for the year in the current financial year. And in terms of our forecast projections, we are forecasting to have an average number for the year of 7. So that's not a live number. We've got a lot less than 7 currently. But if you average that figure over the year, we'll have an average figure of 7 for the year. Can we move on to the next slide? I believe my colleague Siobhan's going to pick up this next slide.
Hi, I'm Siobhan Kepley, Finance Service Manager for Children's Services. These next couple of slides just go through the main key cost drivers for CLA. So the graph in the top part of the slide is the CLA numbers, the total CLA numbers going back to January 22. You'll see that there was an unexpected spike in summer 22, which was around children coming in with complex needs. That's been relatively stable since around January 23, but we have seen a recent spike more recently, which is around the 16 groups coming in with non-accidental injury. The second graph just shows the total placement numbers at a point in time in total placement days, comparing 22-23 and 23-24. The trajectories remain quite the same, but you'll see that there has been an increase between the 2 financial years, which I think we talked about in the previous agenda item, which is mainly around the UASC transfer scheme. Competitive needs, so increase in residential placements due to competitive need and lack of sufficiency in fostering, and bespoke 16+ supported accommodation placements. We're also seeing the reduction in in-house fostering, which is having that impact on external placements as well. Next slide, please. And this graph just shows the average weekly cost per placement type. We have seen a reduction in the average weekly cost for unregistered placements, which has gone down by 9% from 22-23. However, we've seen an increase in the average weekly cost of residential placements of 12% from last financial year. I'll now move on to my colleague Jo, who's going to go on to the DSG budget monitoring.
Morning, everybody. My name is Jo Curry. I'm Finance Service Manager for Education, Inclusion and Schools. Just got a couple of slides just to update you on the DSG budget monitoring position, which is the slide on the screen now. And another slide just on the transport, so transport and home to school transport. As you can see, on this slide, the headline just needs to be updated. 15.5 million forecast in-year deficit was actually for month 6, and that has worsened slightly as of month 7 to 16 million. And that's largely as a result of a revised forecast for our income on partnership place funding. So that's now 16 million. And that translates to an expected forecast deficit at the end of March 24, 38 million. And as what's going on in the background, I think we updated you last time. There's a lot of work now to update our deficit management plan for the DSG. And that is going to be presented, or some draft figures presented to SIPFA at the end of next week on Friday the 19th of January, and we hopefully be able to share some of that with you after that date. And next slide just covers home to school transport. There hasn't been any overall movement from month 6 on the transport forecast. There's been some small tweaks on home to school transport. We've had some additional funding in from Ukrainian funding from schools, which actually covers transport for Ukrainian children for their education. And then there's been a small adverse movement on send transport, and that's largely just from a revision of our children and the number of children we're transporting. Their transport.
Very much. Members, do I have any questions, please? Councillor Slocum.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted on page 100, this is probably a dynamite question here, but the deficit on high needs, I wanted to know if you can explain why that is such a deficit, if you have any detail of the why, and what's your forecast for improving it?
So that is something that's being worked through at the moment. There's a programme of work going on between finance and the service to look at mitigations around reversing that deficit on the high needs block, and also to return our in-year overspend to 0, basically. That is ongoing at the moment. I don't know whether you want to say anything more on that from a service perspective on the high needs block.
Yeah, there is a national context to this. The Somerset is not out of line. The government identified about 2 or 3 years ago now the issues nationally in relation to local authorities and the deficit on the high needs block. They put in place 2 different types of activity to try and work out why people have those deficits and to help them to reduce them. So there were 2 schemes. One was called the safety valve scheme, which was basically the top 50, was it? I can't remember how many authorities it was. It's about 30, but so the top number of authorities in the country, the highest deficits in the country. The highest deficits in the country are in the hundreds to 200 million pound deficit currently. So we are way below that in terms of where we are. And there was a request that Newton Europe worked with those authorities to help them work out how to reduce their deficit. And those authorities were given a very large sum of money each to get them back to base, on the basis that the Newton Europe work will prevent them going into deficit again. I think there's some question about whether that's been successful. Not national data on it at the moment. The second group of authorities were authorities in something called DUV, which was delivering better value excellent people. And there were 3 tranches for that, to look at the next groups of authorities down in terms of people with deficits that were increasing. We were in tranche 1 of that delivering better value project. Newton Europe came to see us and worked with us to help us work out how we could reduce our deficits going forward. There was no financial handout, if you like, of any size to help us do that. Every authority was given about £1 million in staffing and measures to develop a plan. So we have done that work with Newton Europe. Interestingly, the research shows that although that plan is meant to reduce the deficits down to 0 over several years, that it is very unlikely to do that. And every local authority who has been delivering better value is saying this is not possible. And I think we're looking at every authority saying that they're likely to increase their deficits by a significant sum each year, even with this work. So this work will mitigate the increase, but won't reduce it entirely. We also have to deliver what's called a deficit management plan as part of education to explain how we think we are going to mitigate the increases until 2030, so over the next 6 years. We have to deliver that to DfE and SIPSA in draft later this month. They will then help us refine that to a point where they feel confident that we will then deliver that deficit management plan. And we can, of course, bring that plan into scrutiny so that you can have a look at what we're going to do. Unfortunately, it doesn't just depend on the local authority, it depends on lots of different elements of the system to work together effectively to reduce that deficit going forward. But we're very happy to bring that to the committee so that you can understand what we're proposing and who needs to be involved in that to make it happen.
Madam Chair, can I just add if I don't mind? The problem I always find difficulty is when we always hear how we're much better than anyone else.
You're not right.
You know, and do you know what I mean? And I find it irritates me a little bit because we don't want to see a deficit. That's what we need to work towards, not knowing that we're better, less, or anyone else. It's about this authority, isn't it? You know.
Yeah.
I would like definitely to see a plan.
Yeah, so we're no better than anybody else, other than the top branch, but it's a national problem. And I think there's one authority in the country that doesn't have a high need deficit for historical reasons, but every other authority in the country does. And it is a concern because currently that is sort of effectively underwritten by the government, that deficit, but the government is saying that in 2026 they will stop underwriting that and it will come back to the local authority. And obviously, if that did come back to the local authority, it would be a huge financial impact, and it would for probably nearly every authority in the country.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
Just on the same subject, it should not get our hopes up, but we might remember that the government just told the local authorities that it was going to return the high needs deficit to local authorities in 2017, told us it was going to do it quite soon. It didn't, and it hasn't, and it hasn't, and it hasn't. It's been put off every year. And while it should not in any way stop us trying to do our very best to use the money that we have for the best outcomes for children and not so wasted, of course, that points up just what a big national problem this is. And there is some sort of structural stuff that absolutely needs to happen in terms of both what expectations of local authorities are and also what the DSG, the Dedicated Schools Grant, is intended to cover and how it can do it. It just, of course, we have work to do here in this authority, and nobody would ever want to say that any authority does it perfectly, and we know we have improvements to make. But it's not just a sunset.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. I'm going to go online to Joe Simons. Can you introduce yourself? Joe is one of our co-opted members.
Yeah, no problem. Hello, Evie. I'm Jo Simons. I'm head teacher at South Somerset Partnership School, which is the pupil referral unit that covers the south of the county. But I'm also co-opted member to kind of just provide some advice from Somerset Schools Forum. So it was just a comment, really. I have been involved in the deficit management plans as part of the advice that I would like to be able to give to the committee. The most recent discussion was very, very early in January and was cancelled, but obviously things have moved on from that. Once I get that information, it would be, and I've been talking to Lee about this, really, my role really to update you on kind of how things are moving forward so that you can kind of support some quality scrutiny around that. I could talk for the next 3 hours about the issues around the higher needs deficit, but I won't. But I'm happy to sit anywhere along the way. And just to say, it is a national problem, and I do kind of agree with Francis that with a change of government and the current political climate, I think we're likely to see some kind of change around that nationally, simply because, as Claire says, it's not just a Somerset issue. In fact, it's a national issue.
Thank you. Do I have any other questions from members? Councillor Nicholson.
Yeah, on other subjects, there were two I wanted to raise. One was perhaps some comment on slide 7. There seems to be some fairly extraordinary volatility in charges. And from, I mean, secure going dramatically down and then climbing up a bit. Unregistered apparently coming down. Just the volatility was perhaps would be worth exploring. And the other thing that I wanted to explore came from the DSG. Forgive me, but partnership contributions, partnership places, what does and lack of partners' contribution, what's that all about and what does it mean? Thank you.
Who would like to answer that one?
I can answer that, Evie.
Oh, please do, Jo. Thank you.
Sorry, that's a bit technical and a bit complicated. The pupil referral units across Somerset are commissioned to provide partnership places. So that's part funded by the local authority, part funded by the schools, and it was set up as a way to recoup funding for services that that schools can provide, and also to support the preventative work around higher needs and to prevent exclusions. Sadly, that's not been the case. We are continuing to see exclusions rise, and so consequently the physical places are not available. They have to be funded by the local authority and are in place for children who've been permanently excluded or who require medical tuition alongside some kind of medical intervention. So it was just something we've not been able to implement as a result of capacity being taken by permanently excluded children.
May I come back quickly?
Yes, certainly, Councillor Nicholson.
Just to be clear, you're not saying that people, what you're saying is that schools should be paying bills or providing funding. It's not that they're refusing to pay the bills. It's that they're excluding the children instead so that they don't become, such a bill doesn't become due.
What one might say, I think that, you know, in terms of schools, they ask for partnership placements and they are willing to use those as part of kind of earlier intervention strategies. But the number of permanent exclusions means that that's not, it's just not possible to provide. I suppose the example if, for example, in South Somerset, you know, I've got a significant number of permanently excluded children. I haven't got another army of people over there that can go and then do partnership work as well. You know, it's me and 10 teachers kind of doing all of it, and so we've got to balance those places out.
Just to say that that was very helpful. I had wondered when I first heard partnership basis, was this health money that was at her partnership with health and health wasn't coughing up or whatever, or who it was who wasn't coughing up. But I understand better. Now, I did have another question, which I'm not sure is for finance people, or maybe, about the volatility of costs in the care sector that is shown on slide 7. Do we have any understanding of what that's about, or is it indeed about individual children's needs which provide that particular volatility?
Yeah, I think some of it can be to do with the complexity of children's needs that are in those placements, which can obviously depend on the weekly cost, but also around the providers that we're using. So the unregistered placements, we're seeing a drop in the unregistered placements due to the staffing providers that we were previously using. We're not using those as much in terms of nurse line and formulary, which are quite expensive providers that we were using, which is why we're seeing that reduction in the unregistered.
Yeah. I'll just add in, I think the volatility comes down to several sort of different pressures and drivers in the system. So one of them is that we have, thank you. One of them is that obviously needs are changing over time. So that complexity, that age of complexity as well coming through. And we think things like COVID, the long-term effect of COVID, cost of living crisis are some of those drivers. So we're constantly working hard at all levels of the system, you know, from Connect Somerset right up to the edge of care and also children in care, and to try and address that. You've got a driver in terms of practice, so practice can change, but we've been pretty consistent in practice. The current reviews we're doing at the moment have some changes which we'll try and make to improve practice as well. And then you've got changes in terms of what we do in commissioning, and the different mechanisms that we're using. Yeah, so building Homes and Horizons, you can see, has had a really big impact on unregistered places. And then the final driver is probably the market. It's slightly slower, but it is an upward trajectory. You'll have seen in some of the figures, your residential care has increased by, I think, 105% in costs over a 6-year period, from 2016, no, 5-year period from 2016 to 2021. We're still seeing that upwards trajectory happening as well, and that affects availability in the marketplace, and therefore changes what we're able to do. So one of the things we're seeing is a lack of sufficiency in fostering, which means that we're using more residential care. And that's a really big issue. So that's why fostering has to be, both internal and external, has to be one of our big drivers over the next year, to try and increase the number of foster carers that we have available. So all those different factors are always live, they're always shifting around, and there's a huge amount of work in the home team, in the social care teams, in fostering and everything else, to try and keep things contained, and keep improving both the quality as well as the reducing the overall cost.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for that. It's really hard for me to sum this one up, but it's very data driven, so I'm not going to make out I've got a degree in maths or anything. So you've seen the monitoring, the forecast and the drivers. We're going to have the deficit management plan, all of that brought to us when that's all completed within the next month or so. Sorry, could just correct me, was that right? Do we have a time frame for this one, please? No, we will see this in the future. We'll see this in the future. It's ongoing, but like we've just heard, that the spending outgoings is quite fluid and subject to change. I'm going to offer a short comfort break. Bear with me, I don't drink tea or coffee, so I've got no idea how long it takes to make one. How long would you suggest, please?
Come back to 10 minutes.
He's cool. 10 minutes. See you in 10 minutes. Thank you. Welcome back. We are on agenda item number 8, which is an update on the short break provisions and respite. And this item will be led by Louise Palmer, the Council Strategic Commissioner and Children's Services, and Children's Services, and Joe Manning, Head of Services. Sorry, I should check my commas and my full stops. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. You've introduced us already, so we don't need to do that. Thank you very much. We're going to take you through a little bit of context on short breaks, and then we'll go through our proposals, and hopefully you'll be able to support us as we're going through. Okay. The first few slides of these, slides 2, 3, and 4, I'm not going to go through. They're for your reference, particularly if you're unfamiliar with the world of children with disabilities. So I'll leave those there for you. I will start at this slide to give a bit of context. So the numbers, we have 141 children with disabilities who have a social worker. And then we have 427 children with disabilities who receive early support before you get to a social worker. And that's in the context of 5,490 children who have an EHCP, an Education, Health and Care plan. So what that tells you is that all children with disabilities probably have an EHCP, but not all children with an EHCP will have a disability, if that makes sense. Children with disabilities, including neurodiversity, are a relatively small group in the context of children that we work with, and they need a different kind of support.
So this presentation is about short breaks for children with disabilities, because we have a statutory duty to provide a range of short breaks for families where they have a child with a disability. So our current resources that we have in order to do that is a range. We have 2 residential homes, that's reduced from 3. we had in 2022. That offers a total of 8 beds a night for children to experience overnight short breaks. This is currently underused because of staffing difficulties. The amount of beds are underused. We have 21 Somerset supporters. Again, we've seen a decline in the number of Somerset supporters. Somerset supporters offer support to children and young people in the community to help them access things like swimming pools and to give their parents a break. They can also support children in their own home. We've seen a decline in the number that we support to do that. We have 1 dedicated short break foster carer, and that, again, that's reduced significantly in the last gradually and significantly in the last 5 to 10 years. We're doing some work with fostering on how to improve that. There's also some holiday provision from the Children's Inclusion and Activity team, and that provides a service or some activities for 752 children and young people with disabilities a year. Also children with special educational needs are included in the summer holiday and activities food provision, which offers really fun things much more locally for a number of children who access that support.
Okay, so to tackle some of this, we held a sprint in December to look at short breaks, but we ended up discussing a range of related issues. For those of you who don't know what a sprint is, it's a fast, intensive way of working on a complex issue or a problem. So a small group of us would work together for up to 5 days to understand and solve a problem and then test those solutions. So really short, intensive work. We bring in experts along the way to advise us on particular issues as we're talking about. So we had 3 days and we heard from a range of professionals across schools, social care and the voluntary sector. We had the Parent Carer Forum with us during those 3 days. We also had really valuable input from a parent carer, thank you to Helen, and from a young person from the Unstoppables, thank you to Josh. And all of that came together during those 3 days, along with additional views and experience that the group had from our own conversations with families or people we work alongside. So our discussions in that sprint and the resulting vision that came out of that sprint is what we're here to talk to you today, hoping you'll be able to support us going forward.
And I think it's good to add that the problem that our sprint was trying to address was that we assess more children as needing a service of sort of short break than we can actually provide. So there's an unmet need, unmet assessed need out there in Somerset. So that was the problem that we were trying to address, wasn't it? So the next slide is about what families told us, and this is children who children who receive the service as well as their wider family. And there's some really helpful quotes here. It's my life, it's not a service. Young people just want to have the same opportunities as everyone else. We shouldn't have to fight for what we need. And we had a really strong sense from families and young people that it feels like an adversarial fight right from the very beginning. And I think we see that in our side of the service too. We don't feel it, but we see it. The outcomes of that. There was a really good example of that we were told about a new build leisure centre that was really close to the family's home, and it was built without accessible facilities for children or adults with disabilities, because there was one near enough legislatively, legally, for us not to have to do that. And that just makes life that little bit further and that little bit harder for families where they need things actually a little bit closer and a little bit easier. I thought that was a really powerful example. This is a really powerful quote, which is, I'm a 17-year-old male and my mum has to do my personal care. That's not what 17-year-old lads want, and it will be different when he's 18, but because he's 17, we haven't got a provider that will provide that care. If I could take my child to the park, I wouldn't need a short break. So if when we're designing parks and spaces for families, we bear those needs in mind, then we won't need as a council to necessarily spend money elsewhere. And one carer, I don't ask about clubs because they won't really want my child to go. So a feeling of difference is what we heard from families.
So some of the big issues that came up during the sprint time, the process to get short breaks is too long. We had about 3 flip chart papers on the wall which described that process. It is far too long. Assessment of the need for short breaks. We found that when we know that we have restricted resources, that can really skew the assessment, and the assessment doesn't necessarily give a true picture of need when we know that we're not able to meet that need. So we need to look into that further. Trust. We know that earning trust from parents and from children and young people, rather than expecting it, is vital. That range that we are required to do in the regulations, we need to meet needs across age ranges, across ability, across people's interests, and of course across the geography of Somerset, which is huge. And that is really difficult, and we acknowledged that during the sprint. Transport nearly became a rude word during the sprint. It's a really big issue. You'll have heard the word transport several times, no doubt, in Scrutiny. It's a really big thing. We do need to tackle it. The workforce. We need to make sure that the work that we're offering is a rewarding and exciting and popular career to have, to work with children with disabilities. Those people that we already have working in that field say that it is rewarding, say that they really love it, and they are fantastic at what they do. We need more of them. The fight, as Joe said, parent carers have consistently told us about the fight to get resources, to get what they need for their children. And that directly impacts those parents' well-being and their mental health, which then has consequences in other parts of life and other parts of our work. So it's a really key thing to bear in mind. And then feedback and how we use that feedback. So we get really good feedback from the Parent Carer Forum. We also get feedback through complaints, through mediation, through tribunals, and through the Ombudsman. So we need to take on board that feedback through those routes and make sure that we are affecting the whole piece through that. That's also where some of the money might come from. We spend a fair bit of money on mediation and on tribunals. So if we can reduce those, we may be able to get more money into the right place. Okay, so let me just take a quick drink because I've got a frog in my throat. We don't have a lot of time here, so I'm going to take you through a really quick run through of what actions we plan to take. So the process. We will redesign that process for short breaks, those 3 pages of flip chart paper that we had, so that it is faster. That is a key piece of work. We will also increase access to local resources. So we will increase access within communities using LCNs, our local community networks, PCNs, our primary care networks, neighbourhood teams, and Connect Somerset, so that short breaks aren't needed as much, so that you can access more in your local community. It's closer to you. You don't need as much transport. Also, so that parents can influence what happens for their child within their community, they can much better influence something that's local to them.
In terms of what workforce, which is obviously a massive part of supporting any family, we're wanting to encourage providers and workers in this field. Some of them, there are some providers who won't work with children but will work with adults, and we then struggle for that 17-year-old lad until he turns into an adult at 18 to get exactly the same job done. So we need to we need to misbuff some of those worries that some of the adult providers have. And we also need to understand the decline in our fostering population and in our Somerset supporting population, which provide that really valuable support to families. And identify what the right incentives, how can we support people better to support our families.
So we will also develop local hubs alongside Connect Somerset, who are doing that across the county at the moment. Those local hubs could be our residential homes, where we already have specialist workers who know their stuff. They could be special schools who also have specialist workers and who certainly do know their stuff. But they could be community hubs. They could be buildings in the local area where people naturally congregate, which is where Connect Somerset are doing a lot of their work. Out of which will come spokes of specialist support into communities. So helping community projects to be accessible and helping special schools to be a really big part of their local community.
That localization may also help some of the workforce issues to be fair as well. So I just thought about it. I should have thought about that when I was sprinting.
So all of those actions pulled together, we want to increase local support and reduce transport. We want to increase families' ability to get help earlier, faster. We want to improve families' ability to support each other locally in their communities and to increase families' ability to influence their local provision. Okay, so next steps. This has only just begun. We only just did the sprint in December. You are one of the first audiences to hear about what we did. Joe and I will complete an action plan this month, and then we're going to hold fortnightly meetings. We're going to hold them in a sprint style, so they're going to be intensive, small amount of people, bringing in experts to those meetings as we go along and as we need them, so that we unblock issues and we drive progress through. And we're suggesting we return to scrutiny at some point in May, maybe, to give you a further update on how we.
And then we just did a cheeky final slide really about what you could do to support us, and because it's not just within the realm of short breaks. I think some of the issues that came up in the sprint were much wider, which you'll all have some opportunity to influence, I hope. So we'd like you to be our critical friend and help us understand what we need to be careful about and mindful of. In the support we've had from councillors in the past about in relation to fostering, I'm wondering if we can have a similar level of support in relation to the workforce here. There's obviously issues about accessibility in your own communities and in your own localities. And it's that since I did the sprint, I've been looking at my local community really differently when I walk around it, and I think, oh, I don't know why we haven't, haven't put that there and things. So I think it's about just keeping those children in mind, because those children don't want to be hidden, and they need to be very much part of our community. Thank you. I think it's questions, isn't it?
It is. Me, members, do we have any questions, please? There we go, got people sprinting already. Councillor Slocum.
Well, I think it's self-evident. I think we all want to join the sprint with you. I don't think there's one person here that would like to sprint. I got a bad knee, but I'd like to sprint with you. I think when you're asking about what members can do, I think the thing that I find very sad is that we almost need to get rid of the word disabled. We almost need that word to be it to be as part of normality. So when we look at doing parks and we look at areas, so disabled people should be first and foremost. It should be natural. So in a way, I hate the word disablement because I think we're doing a secondary. That person just feels secondary. I don't like that. So when you say support, keep children with disabilities in mind, I would say no, change that. Support, the disabilities must come above everything so that everyone knows that any play areas, any areas of access, anywhere, a disabled person can always get there. So they're never excluded. So I'd like to change our mindset in a way that we just change it around. So they don't come second, they come first. So that they will not upsettle in this world, that they are part of the normality. So that's what I'd like you to do, if I may, and I'm only a sub, so I'm nothing. But the thing I wanted to ask was as well is that you can't do the job without tremendous work of families, parents who are absolutely incredible. I've got friends with disabled children. They are absolutely amazing. We have a deficit budget, but it would be 100% worse if it wasn't with those families. So the point I wanted to ask now, is this the nitty gritty really? Is this going to have a cost implication of what you want to do? Where are we sitting with the budget? Because we can all have great ideas. And I think none of us around this room will disagree with anything you've said. But we need to know where the cost of implications are and what we can do. Because we need to obviously, there'll be a little bit of balancing books needed, no doubt about it.
There will be cost implications, I'm sure. There always are when you kind of make improvements. I think what we'll be able to bring some of that information back when we come back in terms of proposals. And what we will look to do is look at the cost implications of doing something and then the cost implications of not doing. Because currently we spend enormous amounts of money on agency staff to support families. And also on the ombudsman fine and complaints. So we will be able to bring those costs back alongside any costs of any suggestions that we come up with after the action plan.
If I may, Madam Chair, I probably think I would have liked to have seen that at the same time to make your argument stronger, not weaker. It won't make it weaker. It just makes it for us more out there that we know what you're asking for. We know what you need to do because it's a must. It's a must, So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Cravers, please.
Thank you. And I've got a couple of questions. I've got a long list. That way. The first one was I was just curious of how you say that it got reduced from 3 down to 2 and what the reasoning was for that and what actually happened with that site. And I think I'm also slightly gobsmacked that the new leisure centre hasn't got facilities, and I can only think of one new build leisure centre in Somerset, and that I'm quite amazed at. I'd love to find out more about that as well in today's age. But I think it was when you talking about the adversarial fight and the knock-on effect that then has with mental health, etc., and the saving. And obviously, you look at not necessarily savings to savings to the health and social care budget and all the other budgets that I'm still learning about. Is there a knock-on effect savings there that actually we can draw funding from them as well that will actually then might help what we're trying to achieve on that one. There is another question. Sorry it's a little question as well. I was curious when you talked about micro providers and what actually a micro provider is, because I don't really know. And apart from that, I think that's it. Apart from my days of sprinting are well and truly over in any respects.
It was actually a really enjoyable process. I would recommend a sprint, even though I am bored. in terms of the fight, shall I do the fight one? So I think that this is what families tell us, is it takes them an enormous amount of time and energy to get a service. And we have a process where we assess, and that takes time and energy for families. And then at the end of that process, if we haven't actually got the service, we can't find them the service that we've assessed that they need, that's incredibly frustrating for everybody. I think one of the other potential things that happens then is because it's so rigid and so difficult and so adversarial, it feels that way, is that once you've got a service as a family, you're not going to let go of that, are you? You're not going to say, actually, things are a bit better now. I don't need it at the moment. I'll come back and have that big fight again in 6 months' time. That we lose that flexibility, I think, because once families have got something, they're loath to lose it because of how hard it's been to get it. So I think if we were able to have a much more sort of fluid and flexible local support network, and got rid of that element of fighting and not having the resource, we would see the right level of support going, more likely to see the right level of support going to the right families at the time they really need it, rather than because they've been assessed once as needing it, if you see what I mean. So I think that in the longer term, that could improve families' experiences, but also reduce some costs because we're not because the fluidity affects costs as well as the service. The other we spend a lot of time on complaints, a lot of social work time, which costs money on complaints. We spend a lot of money on ombudsman fines and compensation for families where we have assessed they have a need and then we aren't able to provide it. So they're the costs that I think we could save in the longer term. Do you want to talk about the micro providers?
I can. No, I can. No, that's fine. Thank you. So micro providers are in the adult social care team, and they are independent of the council, and they work. They provide support to adults in the community who need that support. So we went to them a year ago, 18 months ago, to ask if they would want to work in children's services as well, since they had those transferable skills. And they told us a lot of really interesting things, and a lot of what they told us were myths. So they told us that they didn't want to have the pressure of Ofsted regulating them, when in fact we won't need Ofsted to regulate them in some of these positions. They were also quite fearful of working with children and perhaps working with the parents of children, the extra demands that would make on their work that they don't get when they work with adults. So there's a lot of myths there, and there's a lot of misunderstanding about how work with children can go, and that actually it can be a whole lot more enjoyable than that. So we need to dispel some of those myths and work with those micro providers to help. You also asked about the homes going from 3 to 2. So the closure of beech trees happened in 2022, I think. And I'm going to hand over to Claire to answer that.
Okay. So yes, we did have until 2022 3 children's homes for respite. So overnight care for children with disabilities, children who are living at home but to have a break, their families have a break. So we retain one for children with mild physical or learning difficulties, and one for children with very complex medical difficulties, which is very close to the hospital in case they need emergency medical treatment. The third one was a home that was purpose-built probably about 10, 15 years ago for children with complex needs, particularly autism. That home was built intentionally. It looks quite institutional in a design that meant that we could keep those young people separate from each other, because children with complex autism are quite confined with social relationships difficult. And also they can lash out in distress. They're very confused by their environment, etc. So that home was originally built to be able to take up to 8 young people overnight. Over the years, that's become increasingly difficult as the complexity of needs has become even more complex with children with medical issues as well as autism who were physically very aggressive and violent. I don't say aggressive because they're not aggressive, it's not intense, it's a sort of part of their expression of distress, really. That became increasingly difficult. So we reduced the numbers down to 6 and then down to 4 to make it more manageable in that environment. Because of the presentation of those young people, the staffing of that home became very, very difficult. Staff were regularly assaulted to the extent of broken limbs because of those children's distress. And not that they were distressed by the environment, but just their understanding of that environment, the whole of the experience, however lovely the staff was, that was their way of expressing, I'm not quite sure what's going on here, I'm not very happy. So it became very, very difficult to staff. That meant that our Ofsted registration, in terms of the consistency of staffing and the inability to staff that consistently and well, our Ofsted registration started to reduce. So we were required improvement rather than good for an extended period. And then we had several inadequate judgments, and we couldn't get ourselves out of that inadequate judgment, to be fair, because we couldn't get consistent staffing, and we couldn't get enough staff. So we're having 1 or 2 children sometimes rather than 3 and 4. And the quality of what we were able to provide, having to use agency staff as well as our own staff, became increasingly poor. We had to accept that was the case. We tried very, very hard, a lot of us, to try and put that right. But in a situation where, as you heard earlier, residential care staff are paid approximately the same as supermarket staff, and that's become an increasing issue since the pandemic as well. Getting people who would want to work in that environment, which is incredibly physically demanding and difficult to manage, became virtually impossible for us. So we took the decision to close that home. Ofsted was supportive of us closing that home. They felt that we weren't able to manage it either, which was devastating for families that were using it. But we knew we couldn't provide quality care. And part of this work going forward is to look at having smaller homes. So we know that actually having that home was so big in terms of having up to 8 and then down to 4 was too many. So some of those children could only manage in an environment really with 1 other child in it, probably not having very much physical contact with that other child at all. So we need to create a more homely environment. So it's more alike, if you like, in terms of where they're living, their home family. We think the institutional nature of that building was also quite distressing for some children. And we need them to be in different parts of the county. Our current provision is 1 centrally and 1 in Taunton. There's nothing really in the east of the county. So we need probably 2, 3 smaller homes in different parts of the county so families can access them more locally, because travelling to those children can also be really distressing. So we're trying to reduce the stimulation and the distress before they even get to the place. As somebody's already said in the council spoken, there is a financial issue here in terms of people having the finance to be able to build, locate property. We are looking at 1 in 6 agreements in some parts of the county where we might be able to have smaller homes built by developers on sites around the county, but they are a year or 2 off, if not slightly longer, and we haven't got to the details of that yet.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've got 2 or 3 different ones, but just on the point that we've been talking about. Those children who we could not properly accommodate at Peachtree, and what we are hoping to do, how are we supporting them with short breaks in the meantime? That's just the first one. Should we just do that?
So what we're trying to do is to support those children in their family home. That's not ideal because those families need a break from those children. And again, we do not have the staff who are able to do that on a consistent basis. So we're quite often using agency staff to go in on a regular basis for very expensive agency nursing organisations to support those families and support those children at home. As Jo said, if we were able to deliver this model, then actually all those costs would disappear. So actually would then be able to support the model of having more homes for those children.
Thank you very much. May I go on to the, and the first one, yes, anything which shortens the chain to get from A to B, anything which, this council as a whole, I feel often spends an awful lot of money not deciding to do something or not deciding not to do something. So any of that will be a money saving operation. That is a really good thing. Yeah, it would be good to get some financial stuff back. And I do remember when the Homes and Horizons thing was being developed, there was a tentative look at what it would save us before it started at the beginning. Doing things better would actually save us money. Now, the question, now slides 12 and 15 are around the bits in them around planning, what we want it to be like. Sorry, I'm now in the wrong place to find them. Can you find the bit about, we haven't put it on the screen anymore and I'm getting lost.
Page number are you on?
13, putting these actions here. Yeah, was the business of, and certainly in the last slide, was accessibility in your community, the design of parks and play areas, toilets, neurodiversity, and the thing about the leisure centre without, which was not accessible. I'm not sure how much that is individual members working in their own communities and how much that is the planning part of this authority who need to be on board with this. Now, we've got 4 different local plans. It does make life difficult. We've also, I fear, not got through the whole question of integration between other parts of the council and things like this. And I think there is a lot of work to be done to ensure that all parts of the council are supporting this and not letting people get away with doing something that doesn't help children. Because children aren't very visible to quite a lot of many local authorities. Children matter to people who are interested, but we need them all to understand it. The other bit which comes from, I wrote down some notes. If I could take my child to the park, I wouldn't need short breaks. But at the same time, on page 2, what short breaks is not, is about things like activities in the daytime and wraparound care at school. But actually, yes, it is, because if you provide if those other things happen, then you don't need short breaks. So I would like to see a lot more emphasis alongside this on the rights of children with disabilities and send, whether or not it includes disabilities, to the kind of opportunities that other children take for granted in terms of after school clubs and wraparound care. And it's not, I believe, there. So that needs to go alongside this. Yeah. Then you don't need so much short break care because people can actually get to work and actually, and at the moment, that's part of the fight.
And I thank you, and I agree. And we did have some conversations in the spring about, is it next year or the year after, that there's the right to work wraparound expectation, and our need to work with the special schools about how we are.
Mainstream schools too.
And mainstream schools too.
Because
but
there is a right childcare, the childcare provisions and our sufficiency for childcare includes children with SEND up to 25, and I don't believe are doing that.
No,
so can you work with them?
That might be a bit of a challenge after school that we do need to address because of the additional support that children get in school hours. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, members. Thank you so much for that. It's really nice to have enthusiasm and real insight into what you've done. I don't believe for 1 minute you spent the whole 3 days running. You know, really good context there. and actually giving people a voice and listening, being able to bring those voices back is really, really good for us to hear. And for members, you are right, Councillor Nicholson, we need to be walking around with our eyes wide open to what's going on around us. And I did notice that you kept mentioning time. That gift of time, just being mindful constantly, it is an extra thing that we can give to you, and anything we can do. I'd love to be present at one of your events. I can't guarantee I'm going to be as quick as you guys, but you know, I'd like to have a real insight if that's possible, please. Correct me if I'm wrong, nod, shake your head. The action plan will be finalised in January. Ask if this can be shared with committee members and invite the officers to return to the committee in May to provide an update. It's almost like Councillor Lee Redmond's here, isn't it? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
On to agenda item 9, pages 119 to 140 on your published agenda. This is the education place planning. We'll just give us a moment while we change over speakers. Yes.
Good afternoon, Chair.
Hi, Phil. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Of course, good afternoon. Phil Curd, Head of Education Places.
Yeah, are you okay to do the presentation from home?
Of course, yes.
Thank you.
So are you happy to go straight in, or Heather, did you want to say anything at all?
I'm more than happy for Phil to do the introduction on this one, please, if he doesn't mind picking up that for me.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Chair. So I'm going to take you through a slide deck this afternoon that just gives you an overview of the education places planning process. So we'll be looking at early years and mainstream school places, giving you some context and overview of the school place planning process, but then also diving into two very specific developments within early years that are going to take a significant proportion of our working time over the next 12 to 18 months. Next slide, please. So this introduction just covers our two high-level statutory duties in relation to the planning and provision of early years places under the Childcare Act 2006 and school place planning under the Education Act 1996. I won't read them word for word, but they are there for your reference. To give you some context as to what is happening in Somerset, overall, our school-age children numbers are in gentle decline. But area by area, we have some very stark differences. So you'll see there a graph that outlines our key issues, our birth rate. So since probably 2011, the general trends, if we could go back one, please. The general trend of birth rates has been a downward decline, and you can link that to a number of factors, but it is something that impacts on our overall pupil numbers. Until the pandemic, we were able to offset that to some degree with people coming in through our housing developments, but housing has slowed down too. What we do have across the county are some really significant differences. So down the M5 corridor, where we continue to have housing developments, and in Sedgemoor particularly, Sedgemoor is the only place in Somerset where the birth rate continues to rise, but also with the housing developments through Wellington all the way up to Burnham and Highbridge, we have school place pressures and ongoing population growth. In some areas across central Somerset and Mendip, the birth rates, the development means that we have a kind of static position, but in some of our rural areas, and particularly in West Somerset, we have very significant decline in the numbers of school-age children and an oversupply of school places and some very real viability issues in state-maintained schools. And this is more of that Somerset context. So just touching on that, the housing developments were offsetting the reducing birth rate until the pandemic. And more recently, we've had the phosphate issues, which have slowed housing developments down again. You'll also see a table there which outlines some of our specific place pressures in Chard, Taunton and Wellington in terms of primary place pressures. And over the last 12, 18 months, we've seen increased pressures, unexpected pressures in Bridgewater and Wellington. You'll also see reference to two employment-related issues which have generated specific school place pressures. One of those is Hinkley Point, which we were expecting. Another one is the overseas recruitment campaign undertaken by the NHS, which brought a significant amount of overseas families into Taunton specifically, and that has created quite an acute primary age school place pressure. So in terms of projection modelling, how do we do it? There are four key data elements that we use to try and project how many school places we're going to need in various parts of Somerset. We look at birth rate data, we look at school roll data, we look at migration data, and that also includes children that are from neighbouring authorities that come across the border to attend Somerset schools, but also Somerset children that go the other way. And we consider that trend data. And we're also allowed to include housing with a reasonable degree of certainty, which is a limiting factor to some degree. And the limited scope of that projection criteria means that we're unable to project the long-term demand for school places, which limits us strategically when we think about that from our planning point of view. So something that we're actively trying to improve is embracing the opportunity that local government reform has given us by working with our single council planning teams to understand how we can develop our projection model to align with the new whole Somerset local plan as that rises, and start thinking about education provision in 10, 15 and 20 years time. So for example, in Taunton, we know that if all the developments come to fruition, we will have sufficient number of secondary age pupils for a 5th secondary school. The challenge for us is where could you put a 5th secondary school in Taunton without completely disrupting the existing education system? So these are the big challenges that we need to think 10 or 15 years ahead of, and currently our projection model doesn't allow that. And this touches on that again. So what we need to do is be ambitious in the way that we project, and of course, the longer out your projections, the less accurate they are likely to become. We'll still need to deliver the statutory element that the DFE requires us to deliver, but working with our planning teams and the local plan, developing much more longer term projection models, which allow us to set aside school sites and developer contributions so we can build the infrastructure that's needed in the areas where we're seeing sustained growth. So pupil yields, and we're moving into the territory now of housing developments and developer contributions. Pupil yields, this is the number of pupils we would expect a housing development to deliver, and it's broken down by 4 different categories. You've got early years, primary, secondary and SEND. They are the children that require specialist provision. And we've broken that down by 100 homes. So for every 100 homes, we would expect 10 early years pupils to require funded places, and that number is likely to change over the coming year with extended entitlement, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. 32 primary age children per 100 homes, 14 secondary children per 100 homes, and just under 1 child per 100 homes. So when those development applications come forward, we will look at the overall size of that development, we will look at local school capacity, and we will ask for a developer contribution which allows us to deliver additional school places where we think they are required. If there's no requirement for school places, we will not ask for a contribution through the Section 106 process. The DFE has recently verified, recently verified our primary and secondary age pupil yield data, and we are currently going through a non-key decision to sign off the most recent version of early years and SEND, so we can refer to that when responding to planning application. When we are, thank you, Fiona, when we are looking at developing school places, our approach is a local first approach, so local school places for local school children, ideally within statutory walking distance of a development, which means we don't have to provide transport for those children. statutory, consistent statutory school age children, for those children under 2 miles, those children aged 8 and over, it's 3 miles. And why we try not to put children over walking distance from school is the very extraordinary expense of providing school transport in a market that's already stretched to its limit. So to give you some idea of cost, those journeys are annual costs for taking a child to a school somewhere between 5 and 10 miles away. So you've got a taxi costing up to £30,000 per year, a minibus up to 35, a coach up to 65. The longer that journey, the more that cost increases. These are very significant costs. If you have a housing development, but you're not able to deliver additional education infrastructure, and you're having to take 10, 20, 30 children out of their local community. Next slide, please, Fiona. And there's just a slide there on developer contributions. This is a key issue for us as a council in our current financial position. So the DfE expects all new school builds to be delivered through developer contributions. In reality, the collective call on those developer contributions, so that's housing, education, highways, health, etc., and the legislation which protects developer contributions or it protects their profits and limits the amount of contribution they are able to pay, means that nothing is fully funded by developer contributions and leaves a shortfall for those various agencies. So those contributions, particularly if we're looking at community infrastructure, they come through in retrospect. So in terms of education infrastructure, we need the school to be in place before the children arrive or shortly after they arrive, which means we have to forward fund those education projects at significant cost, and I hope that the developer contributions come in over the next 6, 7, and sometimes 10 years' time. The not having those places will mean the council will have to transport those children to the next nearest school with places. That would be a significant ongoing lifetime cost. Parental preference and general pressure for those places in some areas would mean that we can't transport those children on scale. We're looking at taking 1s and 2s to many different schools at extraordinary cost. We move on now to extended entitlement. So this is one of our two key pieces of early years work that the team is currently working on. So the first one is around the extended childcare offer. The government consulted last year. Consultations coming to an end. The legislation has now changed, and we've got 3 key dates over the next 18 months, give or take, where more children will be entitled to funded places in early years. Now, I will caveat that by saying that is not entirely good news for our provider market. So in April 2024, working parents of 2-year-olds will be able to access 15 hours of funded care of 38 weeks a year to a maximum of 570 hours per year. From September 24, that offer is extended to working parents from children from the age of 9 months. And then September 25, working parents of children from 9 months to 5 years will be entitled to 30 years of funded childcare for 38 weeks a year, which is a maximum of 1,140 hours per year. Now, the challenge for the market is currently those children that are not entitled to a funded places. The market can charge a slightly elevated rate to parents. They charge enough to cover their costs. What we know historically is that the national funding agreement for early years providers is that the funding rates that are supplied are typically below the level that it costs providers to provide those places. So it creates a sustainability or viability issue for the market. Now, colleagues in finance, they're currently working out what the new revised hourly rate is likely to look like for the coming financial year, and we will share that with the providers in due course. But the risk is, if the hourly rate isn't sufficient, our market could turn away from providing funded places, which means we have a sufficiency issue across our county, and it is very finely balanced, given that the minimum wage is rising significantly in April. Many of our early years workforces are working at minimum wage. Thank you, Fiona. So just to give you some early years context, we have 7,012 children accessing universal entitlement of 15 hours per week, and that's 99% of our 3 and 4 year olds. We have 3,844 children accessing extended entitlement at 30 hours a week, and that's 54% of our 3 and 4 year olds. 1,058 2-year-olds access funded childcare in Somerset, so that's 84 of those that are eligible. And then Somerset's early years population increased by 2% between 2022 and 2023, but it is forecast currently to decline over the next few years, and that's linked to the birth rate data that you saw on the screens earlier. We've got 459 providers of funded places, 177 childminders and 282 grouped provisions. Overall, across the county, we have sufficient places to meet needs, but we have some areas where we are insufficient. We have some areas where we have capacity. So the DFE data, with the extended entitlement, we're relying to some degree on the DFE providing the additional funding for places, but no one's really clear on how many additional places we're going to need. So this coming year is going to be challenging in that we are calculating an hourly rate based on some unknowns. And we're going to need to hold a significant contingency to cover ourselves if we get that calculation wrong to some degree. So from April 24, it's projected that 42% of 2-year-old population will use the new entitlement. From September 24, it's projected that 35% of the 0 to 2-year-old population in Somerset will use the new entitlement. And these are the DFE's figures. They are the figures on which they have based our funding. So if the DFE have got the maths wrong, they have got our funding wrong, and it will create a financial issue for us as a council. The medium super output areas anticipated to require the most additional places are Stockmore and North Heatherton, to the area just on the south of Bridgewater, the Halcon and Moncton Heathfield areas of Taunton, Milford Park in Yeovil, and Holway and Lambrook areas in Taunton. And if we group those medium super output areas roughly into early years community areas, apologies for the acronyms, that shows that most additional places are required in Yeovil, Bridgewater and Taunton, which kind of links to where we have most of our housing development. Survey of providers in relation to expanding the childcare offer. 60% said they did not have capacity to increase the number of places they currently offer. 67% said their premises could not be expanded to increase the number of places offered. Barriers included funding, staffing and space. And 59% said they had concerns about sustainability as a result of the expanded childcare offer due to the funding and recruitment and retention of staff. And you would have heard earlier about the challenges of staffing in certain elements of the care sector. It's the same in early years. It's that they are physically and emotionally demanding jobs, but the level of remuneration is similar to what you would get in a supermarket, but you don't get 20% off your shopping. Other things that we are doing as a local authority, so we've received some government revenue funding, £91,000 for early years expansion and £30,000 for wraparound care in the current financial year. And that just allows us to put some additional officer resource in place so we can start thinking about the rollout of 2 very significant projects. We've also been given a capital pot of 995,000, which is going to be split into 2 areas, which allows us to fund or build out some additional places, both for the extended entitlement and the wraparound childcare. To be clear, £995,000 as a capital sum is rather insignificant and wouldn't deliver much in the way of a standalone project. So we're likely to use that to deliver small, reasonable adjustment projects, which just increase provision in 1 to 2. So that's probably going to be the best value. So the team is engaged with providers who may be able to expand and offer us more places. And the entitlements team and our applications team are working with Capita to ensure that all of the new funding applications can be checked and processed within statutory deadline. And we move on to the wraparound provision. So this is slightly different. This is about after school care typically to allow parents to work in that traditional 9 to 5 model. So the government is giving local authorities in England 289 million over 2 academic years, starting in September this year, to set up wraparound provision in schools. Details of that funding is starting to emerge and how much each local authority is getting in what year and what it can be used for. The ambition is all children are able to access some kind of childcare, wraparound care between the hours of 8 in the morning and 6 o'clock in the evening. And that school would be in a school setting, albeit we could have it in, with childminders in partnership with local schools. The 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. is not fixed and can be flexible based on local need. The real challenge here is that we have seen this before. There have been similar projects to try and create provision in schools, but the long term, whilst there is some initial startup money, the long-term plan is that this is fully funded by parents. Where it's been tried before, as soon as the startup money runs out, parents are no longer able to afford those places. It's not viable for the schools to do it. If we think about schools running wraparound care, they're asked to do it before school, they're asked to do it after school. It's the darker, colder parts of the day. It's increased energy costs. They have to find part-time staff to come in and fulfill those roles. It's really difficult to sustain and become viable. So survey highlights of our schools. So 95% of our schools already offer a breakfast club. 19% of schools offer school provision until 6 p.m. So you can see a really stark difference between the before and after school offer. And there were 20 early years responses that offer wraparound provision, half of those being childminders. And typically that's where a provider is very close to a local school and there's some arrangement where they pick the children up from school, they take them to their premises and the parents collect them later on. And those clubs or after school clubs are not usually held on a school premises. So barriers for parents, where provision is not offered 5 days a week, apologies, where it finishes at or before 5 p.m. The relatively high cost of that to make it viable for the schools to deliver. The schools not accepting tax-free childcare, which is something we're working actively to address. But those first 3 things, if we think about the overall rationale for this is to provide care which enables parents to work. If that care isn't available for a full working week or a full working day, that then presents an issue for the parents and an impact on their ability to get full-time employment. These are the provider barriers. So if you could ignore the numbers to a degree, but the barriers for providers are the staffing of the provision itself, the additional staff, so cleaners and security and caretaking, closing the building later in the day, cleaning it later in the day, the space. So because of the type of provision we're talking about, you can't use generic class spaces, or if you did, it could be very disruptive on the school. So is there the space in a school other than the hall to deliver childcare for the numbers of children we're talking about? Special educational needs and disabilities, how do you differentiate that offer so we make it fully accessible for children with SEND, given that they typically need some enhanced supervision? But we're then back to the viability issue of can we afford to have more staff, given that parent's going to be paying exactly the same rate as other parents. So the lack of demand, historically parents haven't wanted this type of provision and not been prepared to pay for it. Safeguarding is always an issue. So who drops off those children, who collects those children, how does the school monitor it with limited staffing availability, and there's always the funding. If parents don't pay for it, this will not be a viable project in 2 or 3 years' time. Actions for us. So the focus will be, a big focus for us is wraparound care for school-aged children. We'll have to put that into our Somerset sufficiency assessment. We are currently trying to map demand from parents and carers. So we've sent out a centralised survey through our schools. So we've given them a link. We're asking parents to complete that survey and we will collate all of the results in one place. Historically, the request would have gone to individual schools, which was then something for them to manage, but we're just doing this as a central team this time around. So we're going to cross-reference with current and anticipated future levels of wraparound provision. And then we're going to have to put in place some strategies to address the identified barriers, both those coming from parents and providers, and with a particular focus on the barriers which prevent children with SEND accessing our wraparound care, because it's really important. If we're going to make this work, we have to make it work for all children and find a way of having an affordable, viable model which provides the relevant levels of supervision to those children with more complex needs. And then time for questions.
Thank you very much. Members, do we have any questions, please? Pop your hands up now, someone, I'll let you come back later. Councillor Slocum, please.
You've done an excellent job here, Phil, because I kept writing questions out and then you kept giving me the answers, which is really good. I have to say, I fully support the focus on barriers which prevent children with SEND accessing the wraparound care, because they to me seem the real people. No, that's wrong. They seem to be more people that would need the help, I think, for the wraparound care. So I think it's essential for them. I did question your 0.92 children per homes in your pupil yields on 125. And I noticed underneath there's a paragraph to say that needs to be updated. I would definitely think that figure isn't right, but I wouldn't like to say that to you because I think you are pretty good. But I'm just going to say I would just question that 0.92. But no, I just thank you very much. And very good. But if you could just I wouldn't mind knowing if that was correct or not. That would be really great. But thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Just make sure the boss heard that I'm quite good. So on the 0.92, so it's a calculation. So currently, if we look at the number of school-age children that we have and the number of school-age children that are in specialist provision, so 2% of our school-age children are in specialist provision. So that's not 2% having EHCP, it's 2% access at specialist provision. Now, when we look at the yield data, when we consider the secondary yield data of 1,400, and we look at the primary yield data, which is 32, that gives us 46. Then we times that by 2 because of 2%, that takes to 0.92. So the 0.92 is absolutely accurate. We recalculated it only a month ago based on the most current EHCP specialist provision numbers. So historically, we asked for contributions that were based on 1% of our children requiring specialist provision. We've recalculated it's 2%, which means the yield data is 0.92 per 100 homes.
Right, maybe I want it to be higher because I want more children identified. Maybe that's my wishful thinking here.
Okay, so
Yeah.
The reason why it's really important is because when we have those housing developments, we will go and ask for a housing with the contribution of those school places. And we have an associated value, capital value, to deliver a place for those 4 education types. Now, so if we have 1,000 homes, so we would say we're going to have 9.2 children who require specialist provision. Now, to deliver a place in specialist provision for a child, the capital value of that currently is around £110,000 per place. So if you had 1,000 home development and you're looking at 9 children requiring specialist provision, that ask for that alone is £1 million of capital to deliver that additional provision. So while it might feel like small numbers of children, it's large amounts of capital which are increasingly difficult to get from development.
Thank you very much. I stand corrected.
Thank you. Sorry, I can't give you a pay rise. That's not good. Councillor Nicholson.
Thanks very much. There are lots of parts of this very comprehensive paper, but I want to concentrate on one, which is various things around developer contributions, if I may. The very simple first question for a large development, is it cheaper, better for us and well controllable for the developer to to build the school as they did in Monkton Heathfield. And as I think they're doing on the west side of Taunton, on the way to Wellington. So that's one small question. The other questions are about section 106 and SIL money and the opportunity of the council coming together, of all the councils coming together to get perhaps a stronger handle on what we've got, what is owing to us, and also sorry, start writing, Phil. The question of planning, which used to be in a different place from education, and education used to have to go to the planning authority and say, this is what we think we would need. And the planning authority would think about whether that was actually something reasonable to go into the request of developers, let alone thinking about the viability assessments and which bits could be dropped out. So my question is, are we making the best that we can of the amalgamation of the councils to make sure that education, along with everything else, gets the funding that it needs? Then the next one is, what handle have we got and how are we making sure we have a better handle on what is due to us and what's been collected, what hasn't? And I would like to, may I give just 3 very brief examples? Wincanton, in 2015, I think a developer had a section 106 agreement which included 103,000 for education places on the completion of 60 houses. The developer sold the site to another developer who's built the houses. The duty to pay the 103,000 went for the sale of the site. The second developer, as I understand it, though I do stand to be corrected, has not been asked to pay what is due, and the time limit for collection is fast approaching. Yeovil, there are at least 3 sites where the viability of schemes were agreed in 2018-19, with several £1 million worth of contributions towards education across all the phases. I think it's 15 million. Phosphates issues got in the way, but now there's a wish to move forward. Developers have been told that because of the time lapse, the viability assessment must be redone, and the section 106 amended in the light of the new viability assessment. The developers consider this to be an unnecessary expense and waste of time, and very much to the disadvantage of this authority, because, as we all know, build costs have gone up, and it will be inevitable that the new viability assessment is likely to lead to a smaller contribution than we were expecting. The developers are actually wishing to stick to the current assessment. Will save them time, they don't need to go through it again, and the current financial commitment, which is to the advantage of this council. I think it's quite clear that it is, but they've been told that this is not possible. And there's a further site in Yeovil where the developer is now only being asked for early years contributions, nothing for primary or secondary, whereas before they were being asked for a much bigger contribution, which certainly covered primary and secondary. And this rather begs the question of whether the education contributions for these sites, these other 3 sites have also now reduced to early years only. And this, for me, is the understanding. What I've been told may not be right, but it raises real red flags for me as to whether we're getting the contributions that we need and how we know we are. And I'd be really grateful for some thoughts on that.
Thank you, Frances. I'm going to start with
The easy one, the first one, because should they build the school?
yes. I'm going to start there. Although the second question I think is I think there's lots of positives and opportunities. So, is it cheaper to build a school? In some cases, yes. In some cases, there's no appetite to. It depends whether that housing provider has an arm that can also deliver that kind of more industrial scale type of development. You mentioned Monkton Heathfield and schools built by a company called Midas, which then built the expansion of the special school at 5 Ways in Yeovil, and subsequently went bust mid-project. So yes, it's possible. I think more importantly, it's whether we can convince the developer to fully fund the education infrastructure in the first place. That's the really key challenge for us. How we deliver that to best value, I think is a secondary element. But if the developer came forward and said, we're fully funded and we will build it to a specification of your choice, then for us, that's something we can shake hands on. But that's not our current challenge. Our current challenge is securing the contributions that we need so that this council doesn't have to fund.
Doesn't have to borrow.
To fund and deliver education provision. Now, the second one, how are we taking advantage of LGR to streamline planning processes, planning thinking, etc. So historically, with 4 district planning teams and within the district council, education was a non-statutory consulting, and we would feed into housing development consultations and say, this is the expected pupil yield. We think we're going to require additional places or not, and to deliver those additional places, this is the level of contribution we require from the developer. And we, alongside health and highways and other agencies, would all be putting their collective ask into a pot. If required, there'd be a viability assessment, and the contributions that are there are sometimes enough, often not. But we also had 4 planning teams that worked in 4 different ways, 4 different processes, some using SIL, some using Section 106, some using a combination of both, some using a combination of both in certain circumstances. The big opportunity for this council following LGR is an amalgamation of the 4 planning teams and a single approach to planning where we can use SIL, for example, and as a council determine exactly how we're going to collect and use community infrastructure levy. What are our priority areas? And what proportion of that overall pot of money are we going to allocate to highways, allocate to education, passport to colleagues in health, so that we can build all of the social infrastructure that we need where we're delivering additional houses. So that's something I think that will emerge over the next 12, 18, 24 months. And we know that our planning teams, as they're starting to come together, have the ambition of delivering a new Somerset-wide local plan within the next 5 years. But that's a huge opportunity for this council. As someone that leads on education, where we've not always been able to secure the best deal, or at least see what's going on in terms of clarity of decision making. If we can have a single council approach which outlines what our priority areas are, and start collecting central pots of capital that we can call on for our priority projects, that would be an enormous step forward. Then moving on to your third point. So this is more challenging and it's more complex. So historically, whilst we would provide the numbers for those consultations with our district planning colleagues, our direct interface with our planning colleagues was one of our planners that sat in Somerset County Council's corporate property, but now Somerset Council's Strategic Asset Management Service. Now we have identified a particular challenge. So over the years, we have secured developer contributions either through Section 106 and sometimes SIL, but more frequently Section 106, which were upfront agreements. That money has been sometimes collected, sometimes it has not been requested because it's not been required up until a certain point. And the benefit of not asking it for it too early is that it sits with the developer. When you do ask for it, inflation kicks in. So the amount that you secure is actually increased. Now, one of the problems that we have identified is that all of that information was moved into a system called MasterGov. But when you try to report the information back out of MasterGov, it doesn't give you all of the detail that you need. So while we can see how much money there is, it's not always easy to see whether we have collected it or not. What specifically you can use that money for, whether there are any certain conditions or whether there's some kind of more open spend criteria to it. It's not always clear when the closing date for securing that money is. It's not always clear if we've secured that money, where it might be sat. And that's something that we've identified within education. And now we are working really closely with colleagues in strategic asset management to take over that piece of work. And we've been doing some really detailed analysis through December and more to do this month, so we can have a definitive position. How much developer contributions are sat where? What is that money associated with in terms of what projects can and can't we deliver? Where do we have to deliver them? when do we have to call upon this money by? When do we have to spend it by? So this council isn't financially disadvantaged and we make full use of all the contributions we have a right to call.
Thank you. Okay, in the absence of any vote, councillor Kravis, sorry,
Right, the end of the meeting.
and make this the last
I'm a
one.
bit befuddled. Shame we haven't got scrutiny for astrophysics, I think, because I might understand it better. Yeah, thank you. I think you've just, well, I might call you one day and ask you to repeat what you just said to Francis to me. But yeah, it's fascinating, interesting stuff. I've got two questions, I suppose. The first one's probably a simpler one, and you touched on West Somerset earlier. Yeah, no secret about it. I'm a West Somerset councillor. And you talked about new housing, etc. And I don't know whether that was sort of half answered then, but with regard to geographically, obviously, you know, new housing in some areas of the county doesn't necessarily get bought by anybody with children, and the ones that do get bought by people with children usually I would dare to say, maybe not necessarily put them in the state system and send them all on the bus to Taunton. And obviously, there's another issue, I suppose, is that I was gobsmacked when I saw that 19% figure for after school clubs, and I couldn't believe it was so low. One of the advantages, I suppose, of living in West Somerset, and you send your kids go to, say, college in, say, Scat or Hewish, is that they go on a bus at 7:15 in the morning and you pick them up again at 5:30 at night. Thank you very much. It does cost you to do that, though, which is always a very strange thing. So how can we increase that number? How do we try and increase that number? Because the opportunities it opens up to, you know, certain areas of the county, and well, speaking of all areas of the county, and big place, state, the obvious is that you suddenly increase your workforce from, you know, people who can, you know, there aren't that many 9-to-3 jobs out there for people, and if they are, they probably are particularly low paid. And how we increase that number, and I still can't quite get to grips with how low it is, and I wonder if there's a geographical split to that 19%, or how that's split geographically. Is it just certain areas, etc.? Keep it that, thanks.
Thank you. So just think about West Somerset. You're right. So earlier on, you saw a slide that outlines some pupil yield data. So we have fixed pupil yield numbers for the whole of Somerset. But I think it's accurate to say that in some areas, so West Somerset would be one of them, the yield, the actual yield is much lower, but we see certain trends. So where house prices are much higher, we tend to see a lower yield of pupil numbers. Conversely, where we see kind of condensed developments where the house prices are lower, for example, so I'm thinking Highbridge, Burnham, areas of Bridgewater, and what we experienced in the Monkton Heathfield development was that the pupil yield was higher than expected, but you can link it back to lower cost, more affordable housing. So the trend has been, and what we see up in Frome, so we've had quite significant development in Frome, but it's not yielding massive additional pupils. And we've seen a very kind of recent trend following coronavirus, when, you know, the world of work changed very significantly and people moved away from the traditional commuter belt from London. They've moved into the southwest, and, you know, you've got younger families buying very, very large, what we would consider expensive homes in Somerset, but they've managed to buy that for cash, having sold a very modest terrace in a town like Slough. So, you know, we've seen a demographic shift in Somerset, but the yield data that we use for consistency purposes fluctuates from area to area. And West Somerset, for example, has a very significant surplus of school places. The birth rate is particularly low in West Somerset. There are a range of issues out there. If we think about affordable housing, we think about employment opportunities, we think about the number of second homes that we're in West Somerset, we think about our ageing population and the places they go to retire. We think about the fact that at the age of 18, we still lose a huge proportion of our young people because they move away to university and they never come back because there aren't the opportunities for high wage employment in Somerset. So I hope that answers the first question in that yes, we see differences from place to place. In terms of the 19%, I think there are a number of challenges. Firstly, we know that schools offer after school care. They survey their parents almost every year and say, is there significant demand or sufficient demand from our parents for us to create after school care? Because you need at least 2 members of staff, supervision ratios, etc. So therefore you need an economy of scale. You need 10, 12, 15 children whose parents are all going to pay £2, £3, £4 an hour to just cover those costs, the additional utility costs. Let's be clear, utility costs have risen for businesses by 200, 300, 400% over the last 3 or 4 years. So, and if we think that the breakfast clubs, the after school clubs, they're when the school is dark, when the school is closed, it's additional lighting, additional heating. So you've got staff costs, utility costs. That's a real issue. So it's more expensive to run those clubs. If you don't have the economy of scale, you have to put the child price up to a point where parents can no longer afford it. They're trying to think, is it worth working, or is it worth, this is another cost that I have to pay just to be able to afford to work. So that's a real challenge. We also, we're more likely to see after school clubs in our urban schools because the families that use them are in close proximity to the school, come home, you can walk down to school, it's not very far away. But out in our rural areas where the families are more dispersed, and particularly where you have the transport element, school transport is booked in to take those children home at the end of the school day, not at the end of the childcare period. And so for parents, it's much easier for the child to come home on the bus, and maybe groups of children then all go to, they share the duty essentially, so that you might have a group of children. I do it myself as a parent on a Wednesday night, just tonight. I don't really get a headache about it.
Sorry, Brian, should we just condense this slightly, thanks.
So I think that there are 2 challenges: the viability, and if there isn't sufficient parent demand, we can't make it work. And sometimes the rural nature of our schools and the transport system means that there's one opportunity to get those children back to their hometown, home village, and that's all the childcare would necessarily kick in. What we are doing, we are creating a business template for those schools to use. So they would have a business model which would be viable, but it's those factors, whether there is sufficient demand, because this has to be fully funded by parents. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Hopefully that answers your question.
It's going to be a slight comeback. If I do, I'll keep it very brief because I've got a meeting in a minute. I'm just
You've got 30 seconds.
I think that was what you said there, the simple, but what you said about the school bus transport. It is almost like quite shocking that that's such an issue to parents and a possible working population. I mean, for those that may know that certain schools in Taunton, all their buses leave at 5:15. Yeah, because if you've got nothing on, you sit down and wait for an hour and a half. And it's how that, and is it and how that can, how that affects.
Is there a question coming, Councillor Cravers?
There is a question coming. But it's more of a comment in response. Is that is quite a shocking, not statistic, but it's something we all want to look at. That is actually making people's lives worse just because for years and years and years school buses are all left after the school finishes, and how we change that. So I thought we were a scrutiny meeting, so I thought I could make a comment.
That's fine. I'm just well aware that my time schedule was to finish at 1:45, and I've gone half an hour over slackwards. But thank you so much, Phil. Amazing as always. In fact, everybody, the work presented today has had a lot of effort involved in presenting this to us. So thank you very much. Just summing up quickly. Well, in fact, I think you've pretty much summed up for me, Councillor Cravers. It's been really good on that one. I'm going to move on to item number 10. Which is items for information. This is our standing agenda item and provides details and information highlighted and sent to committee members in between the meetings that cover the children and family scrutiny policies. We've had the housing related support and accommodation for 16 to 25-year-olds.
highlighting that the new services will go live in April 2024, and the Children and Young People's December Bulletin, which was circulated to you on the 19th of December 2023. I haven't received any questions or comments. If anybody else wishes to raise anything, please do email in and we will bring it to the next meeting. Thank you very much for attending. Drive safely home, meeting closed. Thank you.